What's up, everyone? This is Anthony Pompliano. Most of you know me as Pomp. You're listening to Off the Chain, simply the best podcast in crypto. Let's kick this thing off. The following is a conversation with Jason Willams, co-founder and partner at Morgan Creek Digital. In this conversation, we discuss building a $500 million healthcare company, thermal demanufacturing, Dunkin Donuts and Starbucks, universal healthcare, plants as quantum computers, and what it was like being in a plane crash. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do as well. Skirt, skirt! Want to know who has the best URL? Crypto.com. That's right, Crypto.com. They're a crypto platform with one goal: motherfucking mass adoption. That's why we're all here. We're trying to get crypto in every wallet. Crypto.com is helping people do that through buying, earning, lending, and card payment. Everything you could want at Crypto.com. Go help your boy out. Tell him Pomp sent you. Download the app or visit Crypto.com. Pomp's got you, always. Ever wanted to get into mining and didn't know how? Don't worry, your boy Pomp's got you. Everybody got some electricity and Wi-Fi. All you got to do is go to COINMINE.com, you buy a CoinMine. It's like an Xbox or a PlayStation that helps you turn your electricity into Bitcoin. That's right. You purchase it, it shows up at your doorstep, you pull it out of the box, you plug it in, connect to your Wi-Fi, 5 minutes or less, you're mining Bitcoin. All you have to do is control it from the mobile app they provide, and then you receive over-the-air updates that add new coins and new features on a consistent basis. Kind of like how Tesla does over-the-air updates and updates the car software. Just you're updating your coin mine. Consumer mining made easy. That's right. Go to COINMINE.com, tell them Pomp sent you, and thank me later.
Anthony Pompliano is a partner at Morgan Creek Digital. All opinions expressed by Pomp or his guests on this podcast are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Morgan Creek Digital or Morgan Creek Capital Management. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Pomp as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only as an expression of his opinion. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
All right, guys. Bang, bang. 151st episode. We're doing an anniversary week of 1 year for the podcast. We've had one of my partners, Mark Yusko, come on, and now we've got the other, Jason Willams. This conversation is a long one, but I think that we've got some pretty interesting topics covered. So I appreciate you guys listening to this, and thank you so much for coming and doing this, Jason.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's good to be here.
Jason and I dressed up when Mark was here. I had on a button down and looked the part, and now when Jason's here, I've got a t-shirt on, and so does Jason. So perfect.
Yeah, but you called me beforehand and told me to wear a t-shirt.
Yeah, because I'm also in charge of the wardrobe on the podcast. All right, so Jason and I have known each other for a really long time at this point. Let's go through your background first, so people who don't know you can get a sense of it.
Yeah, so I'm from New York originally, Queens, and moved to Florida. So you were born in Florida, right?
In Miami, in Hollywood.
Miami, Hollywood, Florida. So I was on the East Coast in Stewart, went to high school there, then ended up coming back to North Carolina to go to school, trained as a physician assistant. They started that program while I was at Methodist. I played soccer and football there. Then got accepted to Yale to do a surgical residency as a physician assistant. While I was at Yale, came up with the idea for FastMed.
All right, before we get into FastMed, explain the difference between a physician assistant and a doctor.
Yeah. So think of a physician assistant as someone who goes to school, gets his bachelor's degree, pre-med, then does another 2 years. So it was born out of naval corpsmen who were in Vietnam, actually. These guys came back from the war and couldn't transition into civilian work. So at Duke University, they created this program to bring these naval corpsmen into civilian practice as physician assistants. And so these guys have tremendous capacity to diagnose and treat, do all kinds of procedures, really manual dexterity, a lot of manual dexterity, and they created physician assistant schools. So that's my training. I wasn't in the military as you were, but I actually trained at Womack Army Medical Center because Methodist didn't have a hospital at that time. So all of my training was at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Very, very cool. So you're there and you come up with this wild ass idea while you're at Yale doing the surgical residency. Maybe explain a little bit about what the initial idea was that eventually became FastMed.
Yeah, so while I was doing that surgical residency, the surgical team at Yale is responsible to take care of trauma. So anytime there's any type of surgical trauma that comes into the emergency room, the surgical team is called to the emergency room to assess the patient. What I was realizing through that experience was a number of things. The physicians and nurses at what I thought was one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country, possibly the world, were pissed off, angry. And I didn't understand that. My whole life I had focused and prepared for this really important transition into practice of medicine. And, it almost felt like volunteer or, like you're contributing something really big to society. And I was really confused by the way patients were interfacing with the physicians and nursing staff and the way the nurses and physicians were interfacing with the patients. It just seemed like everyone was just really angry and confused. And it left a big impression on me. I thought it could be done better. I thought that customer service was totally non-existent in healthcare. The whole institution was built to be lined up for the physicians. Mm-hmm. So it was on their schedule, on their time, on their availability, and the patients were just subjected to cruelty. Mm-hmm. All right. So came up with the idea to develop a retail-oriented medical practice that would do 80% of what you'd find in a emergency room. So it would take care of all the non-life-threatening but urgent scenarios that you would potentially have.
And what type of situations are those?
Right. So it could be broken bones, lacerations, colds, coughs, pneumonia, asthma attacks, allergic reactions. So it's a lot of complicated stuff that these naval corpsmen were trained to do, like right in the sweet spot of a physician assistant. So I knew I could do that stuff using allied healthcare professionals, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants, and do it at 1/10 the cost if I brought it into a retail center, 3,000 to 5,000 square foot footprint with 80% of the capabilities of a big box emergency department.
So basically the initial idea is you can provide better customer service, more efficient and kind of convenient location. And then from a cost structure standpoint, because you don't have the physician who has the big salary and kind of all the costs associated with it, and you're using the physician assistant and the nurse practitioner, you bring down that cost structure pretty dramatically. And I'm guessing that you pass some of that on to the patient as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was 1/10 the cost. So everybody's saving. If you don't have insurance, you're getting access to care. And if you have insurance, those benefits are passed on to the insurer, right? They're getting the big savings because they're not getting a 10x cost. So it was very good. This is, I socialized it to my professors while I was at Yale. They're like, good ideas are hard to come by. You should probably do that. So literally called my mother, told her I was dropping out, moved back to North Carolina, bought a post office.
So I want to talk about the post office. You're a young guy who's got this idea. You kind of had already jumped, right, and had quit school. You knew you wanted to go do this, but getting a business started in this field in healthcare is not like building a software company, right? So in the software world, if you've got an internet connection, you got a computer, and you got some skills, you can literally spin up a server, you can build a website, you can kind of go to town right from your couch. You can't do that when you want to build a retail healthcare clinic. You have to go get a physical location. There's licensing, there's kind of regulation, there's staff and marketing, etc. Maybe just describe, one how'd you pick where you were going to get the first location? And then I know the story, but let's go through the how you acquired the post office.
Yeah, so I think what you're describing are like asset-light businesses. This is an asset-heavy business, highly regulated business. And even though we use technology, so there's lots of tech in healthcare, this is pre-electronic medical record. So when I started, we were using paper medical records, paper systems, paper claims. I go out to First Citizens Bank. I'm 23 years old, and convince them to lend me just enough money to go to an auction to buy a post office in this town called Hope Mills, North Carolina. I picked the post office because it was like the city center, right? It was away from the hospital, the institutional kind of aggregated area where you'd have found typically medical offices. This was near your Starbucks, your coffee shop, where you went to the grocery store, post office, etc. That was the general thesis at first. So I won the post office at auction, bootstrapped it with some friends, hired a medical director because at that time physician assistants still needed oversight, right? It's a dependent practice. It's not an independent practice. So you have to work as part of a healthcare team. Again, that's what made it so attractive to me. You're building a healthcare team, that coordinated care and communication we could leverage and be far better than your primary care doctor in the same location who's not being challenged by some smart kids who are practicing alongside of them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So first practice, I start early 2001. Then we deal with 9/11. We go through that. I learn a lot during that time. The business and the practice is super successful. You see, if you look back over the decade that I ran that healthcare is economically insulated from a lot of the things that you historically have to deal with other businesses when you deal with economic collapse. I mean, if you think about from 2000 to 2015, while I was part of FastMed, we went through a lot as a country.
Absolutely.
And our trajectory as a business was up and to the right.
Well, it also, the acquisition of that first property, right? I think one of the things we've talked about a lot is this idea of like the banks are likely to lend money to people who don't need it. And when people need money, they're unlikely to lend them money. And so being a young kid without a track record, right, and kind of just an idea, the options of financing a business, I think when you have that asset heavy type business, there's not a lot of venture capital, right, that's available. And even back in 2000, 2001, that wasn't a very popular way to finance businesses outside of maybe the Silicon Valley area. And so you have to look at these other financing mechanisms, right? You have to go to banks, you have to go to private investors that are kind of less sophisticated in venture capital and more in a private equity model. And so it's kudos to you that you even got it done, right? Let alone was able to kind of scale that over time.
Yeah, Pomp, my accountant would tell you that I wasn't in the urgent care business. I was a real estate developer because that's really the way that we got the banks to lend the money. They weren't banking my early stage venture into owning urgent care. They were lending me money to buy a post office.
Yep.
Right. So we were leveraging that property at first, using financing to buy an asset, build it into a revenue generating model. And I quickly learned that you can use this levered real estate thesis over and over again. I never made one mortgage payment personally. The businesses float these mortgages, and at the end of this story, I had 123 locations across the country.
So what I want to talk about is how do we go from the first post office to 123, right? What was the kind of in between story of? I think a lot of people when they build a successful business, people want to know what's the origin story and they want to know what was the outcome. But that middle part, I think for most businesses is where a lot of the meat happens, right, in the execution. And then obviously with your story, there's multiple transactions and kind of a bunch of stuff that happened in there. But maybe just walk us from, okay, you start the first one, it's successful, you see that the model works, kind of where do you go from there?
Yeah, so we opened the first urgent care in Hope Mills, North Carolina. I'm working nights in the emergency room still, because you're paying yourself last. And I'd like to talk at some point about, how I feel about entrepreneurship, self-employment, being a business owner, how you deal with investments. I think that's interesting. It's something that, I was able to confirm through just reading as I've gotten older. Like you pick up books, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrants,
one of my favorite
investing.
books.
No, but I'll tell you, that's the greatest thing that can happen to you is you can try something, you can test a thesis, it seems to be working for you, and then smart people confirm that, so that confirmation just hardens your conviction, and then you just keep going. And that's really what happened with FastMed, right? We opened up the first urgent care. I'm recruiting my friends, my other PA buddies from around the country, hiring physicians, working nights in the emergency department, open up my second office, open up my third office, and actually take quite a bit of time. I'm only opening up one office a year at first.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like from 2001 to 2009, I probably had 10 locations.
Okay.
10 locations, 74 employees. Most of them are ancillary staff, physicians, physician assistants. But we have a nice business, all located in North Carolina. And in 2010, October 2010, we complete our first transaction for outside capital with a small venture group called Comvest Capital out of Palm Beach, Florida.
And so when you do that, what was the thought process in terms of taking outside capital to kind of scale faster? Or
yeah, that's it. There was a lot of interesting things happening in the U.S. healthcare system at that time. You had the election of President Obama. I was looking at universal healthcare as being something that was highly likely to be passed. And what would that mean to U.S. healthcare? Would access go down? Would access go up? Who would be the gatekeepers of healthcare? Would it be the insurance companies or the primary care physicians? And then how did FastMed play into the overall landscape? Because it was unbelievable to me at 23 and the group that I had working with me that we could go into any town in North Carolina to start and open up infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure. You would think you couldn't do that. It would be like the privatizing of fire departments. You just don't see that happening. But we were able to pull that off quite dramatically, and we tested that in North Carolina and then into multiple states.
Got it. And so you do the transaction with Comvest, and then eventually you end up doing something with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Maybe talk a little bit about the second transaction and kind of what happened there. And it was somewhat groundbreaking in the healthcare industry.
Yeah. So we completed the transaction with Comvest in 2010, October, used that capital to like blitz scale. So really fast growth. 9-10 offices, October 2010, 74 employees. 2015, 1,400 employees, 123 locations across the country. So I was hiring over 300 people a year and just managing crazy growth. In 2012, this was an important moment for us. It was the first time in U.S. healthcare that a major payer had invested in the provider side of healthcare. And if you step back for a second and you let that kind of wash over you, think of the competitive nature and the ethical questions you'd have that your payer, the insurance company, owns the provider of the healthcare. Where are the incentives? Is there alignment? Are they cost conscious and making decisions based off of their fiduciary responsibility to drive profit, or are they truly spending money to provide you with the highest and best healthcare, sparing and not contemplating profit?
What was the answer?
It was doing the right thing, and I can tell you, while I was there at FastMed, the insurance company did a great job of blinding us to who were those who had Blue Cross Blue Shield, but allowed us to develop patient steerage campaigns to help guide decision making, because that's part of what was wrong with healthcare and what I recognized in 2001 when I dropped out of Yale. The reason everyone was so pissed off is because people were in the wrong place, right? You're at Yale at 8 p.m. with a toothache in the emergency room. Of course, the emergency room physician is going to be like, why are you here? But the patient's like, my doctor's not open. Where am I supposed to go? And this thing hurts. I need antibiotics and pain medicines. Make sense? Yep. So all I wanted to do is create an option for them between the hospital emergency room and their primary care physician, who was closed. He was not optimized for urgent needs, right? It was all scheduled appointments.
Well, and the kind of family physician, or whatever that role is really more of a lifestyle type thing, because they're dependent on the doctor, right? If the doctor's not there, the physician's not there, there's not a lot of work getting done, right? And so we've talked at length between you and I about
there's no work getting done, really. There's refills and reschedule, but there's no decision maker there. There's no decision making there. So
they're a choke point on the business, right? And so it's super unscalable because if you don't see the physician, you don't go there, right? The only reason to go is to actually see the physician and have them look at you and have them make the decision. And they obviously can only see so many patients per day. And then at some point they want to go home to their families, et cetera. And so that kind of leaves open the opportunity for something like FastMed.
And it's a little worse than that too for the primary care physician, because they have admission responsibilities. So they're also rounding in the hospital. So, and then to create new revenue opportunities, some of them will take on nursing home responsibilities. So all of that provides less access for the patient. So those were the things that we knew we could disrupt in 2001. Now you have the advent of hospitalists. So the primary care physician doesn't necessarily have to round on you when you go into the hospital. I don't know if that's necessarily the greatest thing though, right? You want your primary care physician to see you and take care of you and be the coordinator of care. But now you have these patient care teams that you hope are communicating in the most efficient, transparent of ways.
So as you're building the business, obviously you get to 1,400 employees, which is a lot of employees.
Yep.
And then you've got the 123 locations, you've got this huge business, multi-states. And again, this multi-state is important because it's a highly regulated business, right? So not only are you dealing with kind of federal healthcare rules and regulations, but also at the state level. Then you've got the insurance and all these different things going on. And at the same time, you mentioned it earlier, not only are you building the business, you're actually executing a real estate acquisition effort as well, right? Because the model here is not to, hey, I'm going to go set up my practice in a WeWork, right, where I just walk in, sign a piece of paper, and I've got a 1-month lease. You actually have to go and acquire physical infrastructure. So you got to get land in a building, and then you've got to build that out to ensure that it can facilitate the work that you want to do inside of that building for healthcare. So not only just, hey, are there checkout rooms, are there beds, or all that kind of stuff, but also it has to meet certain specific requirements from the regulators. And then you got to run the business, right? And so you kind of have these dual businesses or business lines that are being built. One is a real estate acquisition, one is actually building the business. Maybe talk a little bit about balancing those two responsibilities and kind of how you thought about where to put your time versus maybe hiring others to handle some of it.
Yeah, I think the real estate acquisition component is super critical. So I spent a lot of time on that. And we built a pretty sophisticated cloud mapping technology. We used, I don't even know if you guys still use Google Earth at all.
Yeah, it's around.
Right, but it was actually a pretty cool tool when it first came out, because you could load...
It's like satellite view.
Right, but you could load all of these different demographic things and indicators in and create a model that could give you an idea of a zip code's potential to place one of our centers. So we had about 40 unique demographic indicators that we used, and they were peculiar. They had to do with access, line of sight, traffic patterns, traffic count, population, sophistication of the population, the socioeconomic situations in the population, and on and on and on. I can go on there. We felt really smart. All it showed me was Blockbuster video stores. And at the same time I was scaling the business, Blockbuster was going out of business. So all we did was go out and pre-lease Blockbuster video stores.
So Jason started out buying a post office, and then he basically, I think he became one of, if not the largest acquirer of Blockbuster video infrastructure.
Yeah, we literally started a program inside FastMed that was called warehousing. So before the Blockbuster video store would go out of business, I would go to the owner of these blocks of Blockbusters and say, I'm going to pre-lease your store. I'm going to pay you right now $9 a square foot, something like that. And I want the first option on the store once it closes down. So we had all kinds of real estate tied up, a huge growth plan set up, and a huge market. I mean, I was doing 1.5 million patients a year. So just to give you a sense of what that means, a large emergency department will do 45,000, 80,000 patient visits a year.
Wow.
One hospital emergency room. We were doing 1.5 million patient visits a year.
That's a lot.
So in terms of allocation of my time, huge portion of it was citing new sites for growth. The other one was culture. And that's something that you and I don't really spend a lot of time on. I don't think we've ever really talked about the importance of culture. But for me, holding together the growth and maintaining the integrity of the practice, right? We were in the practice of healthcare. I don't think that practicing healthcare and being profitable have to be mutually exclusive. I ripped off a quote from I'm blanking on it, but I'll give you the quote. Essentially says, profit should be your first social responsibility, right? If profit's your first social responsibility, then you can do all the other things that you want to do. Peter Drucker. It's Peter Drucker, essentially. So you have to have money, and then you can give all your money away if you want, but you can't be the reverse.
Absolutely.
You can't be the reverse. So.
Well, it's also this idea, if you go back to your example at Yale where everyone's pissed off, right? And the quality of the care suffers, the experience suffers. It's kind of the people you interact with, where we've all gone to some kind of service provider, whether it's healthcare or something else, and the person doesn't want to be there, right? And you're just like, man, this sucks, right? Like, I know this person doesn't want to be here. I feel like a burden on them. That's fine if, I don't know, it's a lawyer or something like that. It's completely different when you're coming in, you're the one with the toothache, right? Yeah. Or the gunshot wound, or, whatever it is. And so I think that your idea around culture is really important. It probably trickled down into the customer experience.
Yeah, Pomp, I literally fought every day to maintain the empathy and that connectedness between, our staff and the patients. I mean, your point is exactly that. It's what was lacking in my experience in 2001, where hospitals treated people as patients and we were treating patients as customers. So it's really a simple nuance, a simple transition. But just if you want, if you want to create a premium customer experience, well, what do you do in healthcare to do that? Your healthcare establishment doesn't feel. It's sterile, but it doesn't feel sterile. It may feel more like your community coffee shop. You have technology there and you use it, but maybe it's not the showcase. Maybe there's different seating, different aesthetics. Those are the things that we really worked hard on.
For sure. All right, so you built this thing into an absolute beast. It's like the second largest, I think,
that time?
Retail chain of urgent care facilities.
Yep.
And then Abry comes along. Maybe talk a little bit about who Abry is and kind of how that happened.
Yeah, so Abry's a Boston-based private equity firm. We ran a process just like we did in 2010 and 2012. They gave me an opportunity to have a complete exit, which was interesting and scary. This was my whole life's work as an adult. I mean, I started the company at 25 years old, so to exit was pretty dramatic. But it was a great event for myself and for investors. It was nearly $500 million exit, and now it's Abry's. It's really wild.
Don't screw it up, guys.
Yeah. I mean, good luck. Yeah, but so I'm blocked out of healthcare for 10 years. So can't do anything non-appointment based. And I had been doing some angel investing before my exit and thinking about things I wanted to do next. Really interested in biochemistry, physics. I've written some patents in robotics, like jumping robots. I was inspired watching a guy on the side of the road work with a reciprocating tamper. Do you know what that is?
That's the actual, like, it looks almost like a jackhammer.
Yeah, that you hold,
right?
And it smashes the ground, right?
Flattens it out.
Right. I built those that are automated, so you don't have to hold them, which is pretty interesting, right? Yeah. So to do that, you have to have accelerometers that. Have you ever seen them kick that DARPA like robotic cow, and it won't fall over? That's the stuff that I've worked on. So I've written patents in that, issued, and also in thermal demanufacturing.
After you sell the business and you sign the papers, kind of money all gets wired, everything, the next day, what are you thinking?
Well, I think
like you'd gone to work every day for 15 years and worked your ass off. Like, do you just say like, this is cool, or are you sad, or like what's the feeling?
Well, it actually happened on a Thursday.
Okay.
So I was negotiating what I may do going forward with the acquirer, Abry, and with FastMed, and we couldn't really come to terms. Like, it wasn't going to be big enough for me.
Okay.
So on a Thursday, they told me I could have a complete exit. And I moved out of my office on Saturday.
Okay.
And I started my next startup on Monday.
All right. And so as you do that, let's talk a little bit about PRTI and kind of what that is and how you got involved and kind of where you guys are today.
Yeah. So I had a number of early stage venture businesses that I had been investing in starting in 2014, let's call it, writing checks like $100,000, $250,000 checks, and trying to help from the periphery. One of those investments I made in 2014 was PRTI. It's a really interesting company. It was founded by this Italian inventor named Franco Fini. And Franco Fini had exposure to the waste industry. So this
as every Italian does.
Yeah, why not? All right. So this Italian family has a waste business started in 1974 called Idriadil. They invested in Franco Fini's technology. They spent about 12 million euro to take it through 3 iterations of like form factor, and then idled that technology. So it came to this group that I invested in's attention, and they wanted to domesticate it, move it to the United States, and potentially roll it out across the country. You know, the group were real estate developers and a guy who had renovated Bennigan's. I don't even know if Bennigan's still exists.
It's around.
It's like Applebee's. Okay, so this group wanted to build an international waste management business that used a proprietary piece of technology to process synthetic polymers.
I love them all.
I mean, they're savages. I mean, absolute savages, right?
We're laughing because we know them, and the courage and also the delusion it takes to say, I can do that, is frankly the people that you want to be around, right? But also having people that are pragmatic and realistic enough to understand we can do this, but we can go faster and be more effective if maybe we bring more and more people in that have the scientific backgrounds, the technology backgrounds, etc., to accomplish it.
Yeah, I mean, and especially a business. We talked about asset light businesses. This is a super asset heavy business.
Jason's 2 for 2 on the asset heavy businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it was something else. So I made an investment. I joined their board, and then I told them, look, I'm going to leave FastMed June of 2015. I'll come on as the CEO, run the business, raise the capital, and we'll go. I mean, and they were like, well, what do you want to do? I said, I'm going to package the plant that's in Arma in Italy. I'm going to put it in Connex containers. I'm going to ship it to some land that we'll buy 15 miles from my house in Raleigh. And we'll build this waste to energy oil refinery there and just go from the ground up.
All right, so hold on. Before we get into shipping this, let's talk about how the business works, right? So when you say waste to energy, there's kind of 3 separate components to the business, right? There's a front end, kind of a scientific process, and then there's the outputs. Walk us through kind of those 3 different sections of the business or kind of bodies of work?
Yeah, so here in North America, there are 300 million used car tires a year that need to be disposed of. And traditionally, you either shred, bury, or burn those tires because tires are built to last. They're built to not fall apart. So there's no real smart way to dispose of them. You've even heard people, I think it was in Florida, where they started to construct reefs underwater with these tires. They chained them together and put them at the bottom of the ocean. What they found were giant dead reefs. So they've now had to pull those tires up. PRTI and Franco Fini developed a way to heat a tire. A tire is a semi-solid. It has some natural rubber component, some steel, some fabric associated with it, and a lot of oil. You'll be surprised at the amount of oil that's in a tire. But he developed a way to thoughtfully break that apart and capture those constituent parts that the tire was made of. So you have a huge total available market of 300 million tires a year that need to be disposed of, a legacy business that is bullshit, like the total dinosaur, shredding, burying, burning. You have a technology solution that's thoughtful, environmentally friendly, scalable, super interesting to me. Super interesting to me. They'll pay me to take the tires. So it's kind of an infrastructure play on the front end where you're just a waste management business.
So just to summarize this, the tires are getting disposed of already, right? They're used, they're coming out of wherever, and they're going to get thrown away or destroyed. The destruction you just described is actually really bad for the environment or
energy intensive,
not very efficient.
Yeah.
And so, as we've talked about this, the things that have caught my attention is they throw them in the ocean. They bury them in landfills. They chop them up and they put them on the playground for children, little chips of rubber, right?
Soccer fields.
Yeah, I mean, all this crazy stuff that's going on. And you had a technology that could essentially break the tire down using this thermal demanufacturing process that we'll get into. But the first problem you had to solve was basically, where do we get the tires from, right? I think that's what you're talking about now, where not only can you get the tires, but they'll actually pay you to take the tires. So kind of describe why they're paying you to take them versus, you have to pay for basically the supplies of your business.
Yeah, so most, if not all, municipal governments and counties will allow you to bring a used tire to a landfill, and they'll take it for free as a service, as a tax-paying service. But then that landfill or municipality has to pay to have it disposed of. So there's a third party that's coming to transport, pick up, and dispose of those tires. So that's typically a landfill, a monofill, or a shredding company that's making pelletized rubber or shredding and burying. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And that's really it. It's nothing more than that.
Got it. So they will actually pay you to take the tires, bring them to the plant, and for those that are listening, the plant is an industrial plant, right? I mean, it's 6-7 acres of land, 10 acres of land. There are huge concrete bays with piled high with tires, and there are big metal reactors, right? They kind of look like cylindrical kind of tubes, if you will. And then there's warehouse space, right? That has kind of offices and all kinds of stuff in there. So this is a very kind of not only asset heavy, but very industrial type business. Very, very different than sitting on your couch writing software. But as you figure out, okay, we can get paid to take these tires, what happens to the tire once you bring it on site?
Well, one of the things that we found as we started to scale was that there was a number of tires that were coming out of the manufacturing site that were blemished, that weren't roadworthy and needed to be thoughtfully disposed of. And actually, you had to provide a certificate of destruction to make absolutely sure they didn't get back on the road. And
why?
Right. I mean, there was something wrong with the tire. I mean, it just came off of the manufacturing line and it was messed up. And you'd be surprised at the tolerance of a loss yield here. It's about 8 to 10%. So a typical Bridgestone plant makes 30,000 tires a day. 30,000 tires a day. With a 10% loss yield. So what we calculated was 32 million additional tires a year are these blemished tires that need to be disposed of. I went directly to the tire manufacturer and contracted with them. So I don't even, at this point, deal with the municipal waste the 300 million tires, all I'm disposing of are brand new tires that are coming out of the tire manufacturers.
So these blemish tires have been going on for a while, right? There's been this kind of lost yield. That business is very sketchy in the disposal of these tires, right? So the tires come off the manufacturing line. They, in many cases, look like good tires, right? There's some
you can't tell. You can't tell what's wrong with them.
There's some small blemish, and they're handed over to somebody to destroy them. And so you said...
before they're loaded on a truck, a guy takes a knife and slashes the sidewall. Historically, before I got there, they would not always slash all the sidewalls. So there was another business going on where you could resell those tires. It's a huge business. So part of that waste disposal in the tire business is a reselling business where they identify pearls. Like if you were a golfer, you're playing golf, but you're always kind of looking around for, lost balls. That's what these guys were doing. They were finding like pearls, and reselling these tires. And, we know that it could be a pretty big component of these tire disposal companies' revenue. We don't do any reselling. And what we've been able to do by being present in the market is absolutely certify that these tires are being destroyed. They're not on the road. They're dangerous.
Yeah. And it's because what they're essentially doing is they're trying to find tires that, maybe they don't meet the exact specification, but they're good enough. They turn around, they basically...
they don't know what's wrong with the tire. I'm just telling you, some random guy whose responsibility is to load the tire on a truck is deciding to not slash the sidewall because he's getting a brown bag. Yep. He's getting paid to do that. Yep. And then the guys who are unloading the tires are looking for the pearls, right? They're saying sidewall slash, good tire.
They put it to the side.
Put it to the side.
That tire ends up at the used tire dealership down the corner.
To the side, right? Because think about how many... When I say 300 million tires a year, you have to put things in perspective. I can only process, and my plant runs 25 days a month, all year, 24 hours a day. We process 1.5 million pounds of tires a month. 1.5 million pounds. Each tire is 28 pounds. Mm-hmm. So I maybe around 1 million tires. Mm-hmm. It's not a lot.
Yeah,
it's not a lot.
Well, and I bring this up because these are the little nooks and crannies of businesses where I think people don't really understand some of the stuff that goes on. But two is, one of the things that you and I have really spent a lot of time talking about, as we've invested, is finding businesses where people kind of just do the right thing. And when they do the right thing, what you actually end up doing is, one, you set yourself up to be a sustainable business, right? You kind of don't have cobwebs in the corner that maybe one day can get exposed. But two is you actually can create market dynamics and market forces that put a lot of pressure on your competitors, right? And so when the manufacturers understand, hey, these guys are not going to play this game of reselling and not slashing the sidewalls and doing all of this, there's a little bit more trust and confidence that, hey, we should make sure that they get every tire that they can possibly take versus, we know some shady stuff's going on over here. We can't necessarily stop it, but we're not happy about it and it's dangerous, right? People's lives are at risk if they're driving down the street with a tire that is doesn't meet the specifications necessary.
Yeah, it's so true. And most, if not all, of the CEOs of these tire manufacturers have self-mandated zero landfill policies. So they do not want those tires coming out of their plant ending up in a landfill. Mm-hmm. So it's super important to align with a company like PRTI that has this thermal demanufacturing technology, and we're able to recover the tire. It's a green story, and if you start to contemplate the carbon footprint, the effect of eliminating the waste stream and reestablishing the constituent components of a tire back into the market, you really are doing something positive.
For sure. Let's dig into the technology. How thermal demanufacturing, big words, essentially means that you're going to use a high degree of heat to burn the tire and break it down. He doesn't like that. He disagrees.
Explain it. The technology of pyrolysis. So pyrolysis is a reaction in the absence of oxygen. And that's what everyone's tried to do with tires for the last 40 years. So it's not a new technology. You're essentially taking some type of horizontally oriented vessel. You're filling it with tires, chipped tires. So you've shredded them and you've taken the steel out of them. And then you're externally heating that vessel and you're rotating it. So think of a rotisserie, like a chicken rotisserie. You're eliminating the oxygen inside of it, right? So you're not lighting anything on fire inside. You're just heating it, but you're heating it externally.
Got it.
All right. So zero oxygen environment, heating it externally, and you're rolling it. You're using an auger inside of that horizontally oriented cylinder, and you're driving the volatiles and the materials that you're demanufacturing or essentially breaking down, and you're pushing them out of the vessel. So it's a long process that requires a lot of external energy and usually breaks. That's why it hasn't worked historically. They've tried it when oil is $100 a barrel, it didn't work. They've tried it when oil's $27 a barrel, it didn't work. You know, it's highly dependent on the tipping fee. So if you're coming into this market, you think, well, how do I disrupt it? If I can build a business that can work on zero front end, so even though they're going to pay me to take the tire, if I'm not really dependent on that front end, I can disrupt them because they don't have a lot of alternatives, right?
And what you mean there is basically, although they're willing to pay me to take the tires, if I can build a business that is so profitable and sustainable that I can tell them I'll take the tires for free, then you get all the tires.
And Pomp, when I had that epiphany, like this is 2014, and that's why I was ready to leave FastMed. I was like, holy crap. Man, these guys are going to pay me to take tires, and I'm literally sitting on an energy company. I never looked at PRTI as a waste disposal company. I was watching like Tesla. Tesla, to me, is not a car company. It's a battery technology company. Why did Elon Musk buy Solar City? Because he needed a place to actually make power, right? Why is he developing battery tech and the home devices? Because he needs storage, right? So here you go. You've got solar energy. You can make power. You've got battery tech. I can store it. I can transact it into the grid. Right? He's got a comprehensive energy thesis. PRT,
and it's a privatized, somewhat decentralized energy infrastructure that he's building, right?
It's huge. Think about that. Historically, you have to interface with whatever power company you're dealing with. They're going to tell you the rates. You're a price taker. You don't have a choice. If you want to buy alternative energy, you're not really buying it. He was building something quite interesting. And I looked at PRTI the same way. I've got tires. To me, it's a battery. It's a stored power source. They're going to pay me to take it. So I don't really have an input cost there. I have a technology that's quite different than what I just described to you with pyrolysis, and I'll explain to you how the tech works. And I can make power. I can sell it to the grid or do something even more interesting.
So before we get into the tech, the input is tires into the technology. The output is carbon, steel, syngas, and oil, right?
Yep.
And you're able to look at those commodities, sell some of them as commodities. Some of them you can do certain things to manipulate them into energy, is where you're saying basically you get energy out of the back end. How do you go from a tire to those four outputs on the back end of that technology?
Right. So when I explained pyrolysis to you, I talked about the fact that it was a very labor-intensive and very cost-inefficient process where you have to use a lot of external energy to heat this. What we're doing with our technology is we have a vertically oriented chamber, not a horizontally oriented chamber. So the vertical orientation allows for gravity to affect the simple machine. What I do is I load whole car tires into this vertically oriented cylinder. So they're not chipped. There's no pre-processing or pre-handling. As you know, because you've been out at the site, we grab the tires.
we're going to go through the process in a second.
Yeah. We take whole car tires and we fill the processing tower with them. It's about 6,000 pounds of whole tires. I close the lid mechanically, and then I pull a vacuum on it. So we have vacuum pumps that are evacuating the atmosphere out of the chamber. Then I insert a torch into the bottom of the processing tower, and there's thermal concrete. I don't know if any of you barbecue, like use a green egg barbecue, but the reason it gets so hot is because the thermal concrete won't let the heat escape. It's actually all driven up through the food. We do the exact same thing. So I use a super hot torch for 20 minutes. in the bottom of the processing tower, and I heat the tires that are down there violently for 20 minutes, and I turn them into coal. So superheated coal and steel at the bottom. After 20 minutes, I extract that torch, and then this is where the interesting tech happens. We use what I'll call a catalyst, which is just atmosphere. The atmosphere has 19% oxygen in it. I'm pulling oxygen over hot coals and then radiating that heat up a stack of whole tires, and I'm controlling the temperature zones up that 40-foot stack. So it's just a time and temperature process. A tire is a semi-solid. It turns into a vapor very quickly. So you just change the phase. And our process takes about 10 hours to change 6,000 pounds of tires from semi-solid into liquids and gases.
Got it. And
with only 20 minutes of energy input, 10 hours of energy output. Each processing tower creates 0.23 megawatts of power.
It's crazy.
It's wild. So then when you daisy chain these reactors together, you know, our model is to have 16. You're talking about making like 6-7 megawatts of base power that they paid me to take the input. And
to me, the part here that is so interesting is we talked a lot about these asset heavy businesses, right? This industrial type business. There's a lot of technology that goes on in this, right? So for those that have never been to an industrial site or seen one of these businesses, when you walk in, there are screens everywhere. There's a control room, right? That the towers themselves, the torch, all of this is automated in various ways to really allow for a relatively small team in terms of headcount to manage what ends up being tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds every single day being taken from that semi-solid into the gas and the vapors.
Yeah, I mean, 98% of the process is automated. So the entrance, exit of those torches, the controls, we have programmable logic controllers. You know, that's where my coding experience came in. So, you know, we wrote all of that code to automate the process. And the only thing that's manual at this point is the unloading of the tires, the discharge of the material, and then we've got a pretty crude oil refinery on site too. When you were talking about the assets, it really is a waste receiving component on the front, the technology that processes the tires in the middle, steel sorting, carbon sorting, and oil refining.
All right, so I want to pause on PRTI for a second. We'll come back to this for the fun part. I want to jump to how you and I met and kind of the early days of Full Tilt, and then it will become obvious why I want to pause on the PRTI conversation. We'll come back to that. But just your memory of how we met, kind of some of the early conversations, and then why we decided to start Full Tilt, which was the first thing that we did together.
Yeah, so I've made a few investments in companies that overlapped with Mark Cuban and a few people that we know. One of them was Undercover Colors. It was a date rape technology that came out of NC State. It was initially supposed to be a nail polish that detected 6 different typical types of date rape drugs. I also invested in a company called Penda Health. It was in Africa, in Kenya, that Mark Cuban was attempting to invest in. And we had a mutual friend that was working in his firm that introduced us. I think you had just left Facebook and left Snap. So you left Facebook, then you were at Snap, and you were moving back to Raleigh. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. And they said, look, really interesting guy. You should meet. I think you and I met at Morning Times, downtown Raleigh, for 30 minutes. We had planned just to meet up. We ended up spending 3 hours or so together. It was really...
Jason's wife was calling saying, where are you? Let's go.
Please. Polina, couple goals. So... yeah, so we literally just hit it off. You wanted to start like I don't know, $100 million fund. I said, hey, why don't we try to raise like 10 million? And we decided to create Full Tilt. It really came out of like almost our first meeting. It was wild.
So I'm going to tell 2 stories. One was in the first meeting when we were talking. there was two strategies that we discussed, right? One was go raise a larger venture capital fund, mainly from family offices and institutions, or raise a smaller, more micro VC fund. And Jason said to me, I'm the king of the $100,000 check. And I'll never forget this guy. I said to him, what the hell does that mean? And he explained to me that kind of the challenges when you're whale hunting and the time it takes versus being much more optimized on, look, just get started, build the momentum, and really get kind of things going and starting to establish that track record, which is obviously what we ended up doing. And so the second story is the first meeting was at this bar, and went very well. We kind of hit it off. And then Jason says to me, well, let's meet up again. I said, all right, where do you want to meet? And he says to me, well, why don't you come out to the PRTI plant? And I said, okay. And he said, but I'm going to need you to help me with some stuff. And I don't remember the exact conversation, but it was basically like, you're not coming here to sit in a conference room, so just be prepared. Okay, that's fine. And when I showed up at PRTI, the car tires actually show up in 18-wheelers. And so they pack, I don't know how many tires.
1,000.
Yeah, 1,000. Okay, so 1,000 tires into an 18-wheeler.
And they're woven very tightly. It's not just thrown in. They're systematically woven into a 53-foot. Super efficient.
And the only way to get them out as of right now is for somebody to jump in the back.
The only way to get them out. There's no way you can grab them with some mechanical device. You'd blow the sides out of the trailer.
So you got to put a human in and literally grab each tire one by one and throw it out of the 18-wheeler, which when you're near when it's full and you're near the edge, doesn't sound like that big of a deal because you kind of just grab it and toss it, though they're 28 pounds each, and there's 1,000 of them. But as you get deeper and deeper into the 18-wheelers are pretty far.
53 feet.
And so you've got to literally grab the tire off the stack and then walk it to the end and then you
throw it over a wall
into the bay where they sit. And so the second meeting Jason and I ever had was in the middle of the summer. I think it was July in North Carolina heat in the back of an 18-wheeler, tossing 1,000 tires out of this thing into the bay while we discussed, should we build an investment firm or not? And at the end, I remember us being like, well, if we're both willing to do this, we probably got a good shot of getting along, and this might be something that we should go pursue together.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you, it meant a lot to me that you came out to do that, because that's the kind of CEO I am, and that's the kind of person I am. Like, I don't want anything for free, and I typically have to put my hands on things to truly understand them. And you probably have seen that in the way I invest. When we do something together, like I try to buy the product, I try to use it. Like, I think somebody asked in your Twitter feed, has he running a full node? Of course I'm running a full node. It's a dumb question. Running a full node.
And I think that part of it was
stupid.
When we were there, it's not just, hey, we're doing physical work to do this. And by the way, right, Jason and I both have done plenty of physical work in our life. It sucks, right? Is the best way to put it. Just absolutely sucks. But it was the fact that you were running the company, you had plenty of employees there that could have been doing that work, but you said, look, there's better use of these employees' time when it comes to some of the more technical stuff or the mechanical stuff. This is just a pure grunt work type exercise. I'll go do it, right? Because I can free up my employees to go do more important things.
Also, Pomp, when I told you about culture, typically the hard parts in a business, executives avoid. They don't like the conflict. They don't like the points that hurt. I tend to go there to humanize them and to establish that's my base. So the front end of the business, the manual part, the unloading of the trucks in July of North Carolina in the heat, I go out there and I do that because it is hard.
It sets the tone.
That's it.
It sets the tone. Everyone else is like, well, I can't complain. That dude's over there. And if he's willing to do that, not only do I need to do that, I got to do everything else.
And I require a lot of time to think anyway. So spending an hour unloading a truck like that helps the business. It helps me. It gets me out of the office. Anyway, it's just important.
For you mathematicians at home, 1,000 tires in an hour, nobody is exactly doing it at a slow pace.
Exactly.
So we decide we're going to go build Full Tilt, and the whole idea is basically to create a early stage investment firm. And in hindsight, I don't think any of this was intentional, but correct me if you had some master plan. But in hindsight, looking back, there's a lot of things that we did that I think were counterintuitive to people. The first being, we didn't have a website for, I think, a year, pretty much almost the entire time.
Do we now?
The very first investment firm we ran, I think we finally got a website.
You'd call it a website?
It was a WordPress landing page.
Yeah, I don't think that's a website.
Because people were getting mad that there was no URL or anything. And then the second thing was, we didn't have an office. We used to work out of a Starbucks, right? And I bring those up because it's always been what's the actual most important thing, right? Not what's the things that make us feel important, or what are the things that everyone else is doing so we feel like we need to do it. But it, from very early on, has always been, what is actually the most important thing to get done today to help build this business? And I don't think there's a lot of people who do that, but across multiple businesses that you've built, right, and the ones we built together, I think that's always been one of these themes that's really important.
Pomp, we've seen those businesses that we've invested in that have thought that those were mandatory requirements, like having palatial office space and comforts that you would typically see in the world that these entrepreneurs are working in. It is totally not. It's not my world. If you very kindly called me the king of the $100,000 check, I would take the title of king of the $9 a square foot office space.
I love it. All right, so we go and we start investing in all these companies. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the areas. So this is all kind of pre-blockchain that we're doing this. Talk a little bit about some of the areas that you're interested outside of energy, obviously with PRTI and blockchain is what we're doing now, and just some of the businesses that you kind of have on top of your mind.
Yeah, so things that are interesting to me are technology, robotics, you said energy, the healthcare space, so healthcare innovation, service innovation. I'm fascinated with CBD, distillation, extraction, farming, if you could imagine. I think it's important. And then just hard sciences. So I tend to spend my free time and the time I'm educating myself on investment in that space. I've talked a little bit about quantum biology. I think it's an interesting science that's evolving. It's an important one. So those are the things I'm kind of focused on now. But again, all of that stuff, though, it's probably lays into infrastructure. So I'm trying to find the gaps, in where something's going, whether it's an idea, a concept, a service, and how do we get the tolling? Like how do we get involved in the tolling of those concepts?
For sure. And so as we're making these investments, we invested 62 companies in a year and a half. It was a pretty rapid pace. Obviously, it's gone very well. We were doing it at a Starbucks, but I got to bring it up. You don't like Starbucks. You're a Dunkin Donuts guy.
Yeah, we ended up at Starbucks because it just had better Wi-Fi, and I think you like the iced coffee there better.
Listen,
but we're Dunks guys. I mean, value play, $2 coffee. I mean, I'll stay there all day.
I hate hot coffee. I hate it. So I
really?
always get iced coffee. Jason always gets hot coffee. And there's been a couple of times where when we get to Starbucks, he panics and he orders these things off the menu, and it's hilarious to hear him order, the Frappuccino.
Nah. White chocolate mocha, soy or something. But I'm not great at that.
I want to go back to PRTI for a second. Because for a year and a half, we pretty much spent every single day together, right? And we'd invested in all these companies. And one day we are driving to Charlotte. And I remember...
we were going to buy a laundromat.
Yeah.
A McDonald's.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, shout out to the 2U Laundry guys, Dan and Alex. These two young founders, they're just straight savages. right?
Amazing.
Literally started a laundry business, grew very quickly in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they called us and said, hey, we want to build our own facility, right? Very similar to the kind of the FastMed playbook of kind of vertically integrate the actual physical infrastructure with the business on top of it. And so you and I were driving down there, and we ended up buying a McDonald's to build this. But on the way, I remember it was the first time that I ever mentioned to you Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Ethereum, etc. And so just what do you remember about that conversation?
Skirt, skirt. Want to know who has the best URL? Crypto.com. That's right, Crypto.com. They're a crypto platform with one goal, mass adoption. That's why we're all here. We're trying to get crypto in every wallet. Crypto.com is helping people do that through buying, earning, lending, and card payment. Everything you could want at Crypto.com. Go help your boy out. Tell him Pomp sent you. Download the app or visit Crypto.com. Pomp's got you, always. Ever wanted to get into mining and didn't know how? Don't worry, your boy Pomp's got you. Everybody got some electricity and Wi-Fi. All you got to do is go to COINMINE.com. You buy a CoinMine. It's like an Xbox or a PlayStation that helps you turn your electricity into Bitcoin. That's right. You purchase it. It shows up at your doorstep. You pull it out of the box. You plug it in, connect to your Wi-Fi. 5 minutes or less, you're mining Bitcoin. All you have to do is control it from the mobile app they provide, and then you receive over-the-air updates that add new coins and new features on a consistent basis. Kind of like how Tesla does over-the-air updates and updates the car software. Just you're updating your coin mine. Consumer mining made easy. That's right. Go to COINMINE.com, tell them Pomp sent you, and thank me later.
I remember it was the first time that I ever mentioned to you Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Ethereum, etc. And so just what do you remember about that conversation?
Yeah, it was the second time someone had pitched Bitcoin to me. So the first time was in 2012. It was one of our sales guys at FastMed came to me, but I didn't do anything with it.
You think it was crazy?
Well, I mean, I was this particular employee, I was working on focusing him. So for him to come with this magic internet money thing, it was the last thing I needed to hear at that point. I was in the car with you for 6 hours though, as we were going from Raleigh to Charlotte. And, I was just, at first I was very contrarian, very down on it. Again, I was, I understood game transactions, so in-game transactions, because I played video games my whole life, still do. So I understood how to buy things and how digital money worked, but I just wasn't, I didn't have the level of conviction that you did. But by the time we had gotten back to Raleigh, I pulled my typical move, right? Where I said, like, I have to get my hands on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the 3 hours on the way there, there was a lot of healthy banter about this can't be real. Yes, it is real. Here's how it works. Well, what about this? And just kind of back and forth. And I remember you were asking questions that were very obvious. You understood enough to ask the right questions, right? Kind of the pointed, well, what if this happens? Or how does this work, right? And it was putting stress on my understanding. Right? Because it wasn't
all the questions that we were first going through were around how do you hack it? Like, how does this thing fail? Like, we were really spending a lot of time on that 51% attack stuff.
Yep. And so we had started to get into the mining, and I remember I revealed to you that I had bought some mining rigs.
Yeah, I was super pissed.
And I hadn't told Jason that I did it. And usually we do everything together, but I was scared he was going to think I was way too crazy.
You hear that, Paulina? You hear that, Paulina? I'm sorry. It's her birthday. Happy birthday, Paulina.
Paulina is my girlfriend, and her and Jason compete over who actually is my partner in life.
It's Paulina. Be safe.
And so I remember I told you this, and you're like, well, what's mining? And I started explaining it, and we got there and we did the whole real estate thing, and we're spending time with the guys. And on the way back, it was almost like you had been like thinking about the back of your head, and I'll never forget, you was like, dude, I have a power source. And I remember being like, wait, what? And you walked me through the idea that PRTI takes tires, puts it through the scientific process, and on the output, one of the outputs is commodities and the other is a power source. And the business was supposed to sell it into the grid and receive revenue for that. And you had this like crazy look in your eye. Like, what if we just use that power to mine cryptocurrency rather than sell it into the grid?
I mean, that was it. I mean, that was the establishment of our investment into building the data center or the cryptocurrency mining component of PRTI, which we believe was the first waste to energy cryptocurrency mine of that type scale in the world. And so I'm very proud of that moment for us. And I mean, that was late 2015, early 16.
Something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were very early, very fortunate. But if you can imagine, I had spent about $19 million to build PRTI. So to build the mine and stuff, I go all in. So, we built a very big. We were actually mining with GPUs at first, large GPU miner. Mine, and went through the full spectrum of education at that point, mining Ethereum, how to custody it, where do you exchange it, why do you exchange it, do you get into altcoins, what are the tax ramifications of all that, how do you source ASIC miners, learning, just about power, and then trying to model out what does this look like as you continue to invest. Does this act like a real estate investment? Does this act like Forex and currency exchange? It was complicated and fun.
Well, the part that I specifically remember is when we were doing it, we understood how mining worked. We had somebody was helping us, JP Barrick, who was able to
theminingstore.com
was able to help us kind of quickly get up to speed on
we literally
source the hardware.
But we bought the rigs that he had under his dorm room.
Yep, we were just at any hardware that we could find, right? And we were buying all this stuff,
and we put it together ourselves.
And the part that I remember was I was driving there every day, and we're doing all this, and I remember saying to myself, like, how lucky we are that not only are we frankly crazy and convicted enough to do this, but we're doing it at a industrial site where there's engineers,
resources,
right? I mean, there was guys,
PhD level engineers
that worked at PRTI who they loved it, right? And they were saying, okay, hold on a second, this is part of the business, this is part of my job now. How do I get airflow into the room? How do I get it out? Should we chill it with air conditioners? Should we build some sort of sucking mechanism where we basically suck air through the room to create chilled air? Should we just use fans? And you start getting into not just, hey, can I plug a miner into the wall? You really get into, how do you build the infrastructure? How do you become energy efficient? How do you actually
how do you take an ASIC miner and drop it from 1400 watts down to something sub that? So all of this game is about low power cost, low power utilization, and hash.
And so today, when I think of PRTI, I think of not a waste management business, which I think from day one you knew that's not the business. And I don't even think of it as an energy business anymore. I think of it as a fully integrated computing platform where you can basically now power computing power with energy that is completely off the grid, that you self-generate and you control. And I think that it is probably one of the most powerful things that somebody can create, is that vertically integrated computing power that is self-sufficient.
I mean, without a doubt, even if you develop decentralized power generation, you still need access to the grid, right? What I'm contemplating and what we've been able to do is create decentralized power generation with a parasitic partner in data center mining that we can cogen for. So we don't even have to have an interconnect agreement. That's a fail-safe in the event that I wanted to put power into the grid, but we don't need to. We can use that full load of 7 to 10 megawatts of base power, continuous power, and put it into compute. And here in the United States, the total available market's around 170 PRTI plants.
Wow.
So that's what we're chasing right now.
Got it. All right. And so as we're doing all this, we get pretty convicted on crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin. Before we get into all of that, I want to talk about some nutrition stuff, because for those of you on Twitter who don't know, Jason eats at Waffle House every single day. And I'll call him and I'll literally hear him ordering at Waffle House while we're on the phone. Explain the Waffle House situation and what you get and why.
Yeah, so I do this ketogenic diet. So I fast till like 1 o'clock every day. I don't eat after 8 p.m. I drink black coffee usually in the morning. And then I go to the Waffle House. I order 6 eggs, 2 slices of cheese, 2 sausage patties, and 3 slices of bacon, and sometimes a 5-ounce sirloin steak.
Every day. This is what
That's
this
what
man
I eat
eats at
every
1
day.
o'clock.
Yeah, every day. So I went to my doctor to get an annual physical, and she almost collapsed when she saw my cholesterol, because it went from like 116 to like 240. She was super concerned. She's like, whatever you're doing, stop immediately. But then, I practiced medicine for a long time. I said, well, you need to go through the total cholesterol panel and let's look at the indices. HDL through the roof, triglycerides low, total cholesterol okay. So this made me think of a few things, and I need to spend more time on it. And I challenge your listeners to look at this, but I don't think we know shit about cholesterol. I think if you
I don't think we know shit about anything with the body.
fair point. But is cholesterol in particular, I think we know if you have all of these things out of whack, like your triglycerides are high, your HDL is low, your LDL is high, your total cholesterol is high, you're probably predispositioned for heart disease, diabetes, a lot of bad stuff, stroke, etc. But the nuances of cholesterol, I don't think we understand. I think ketogenic diet's real. I've noticed not only my ability to keep doing things that I want to do, this bit of longevity is there. But in terms of my cognitive abilities, I've noticed some kind of clearness of my thoughts. I also have lost kind of I don't know if any of you experienced like midday fatigue or anything, but I was getting that like around 2 o'clock. I was like ready to pass out. All that's gone. So I quit sugar a long time ago. Don't drink soda. Ketogenic diet, Wim Hof breathing, and Waffle House, baby.
So the nutrition is one piece of it, right? And we've had people come on before that talked about the ketogenic diet, and I think that's generally understood. But it's not like you're in your 40s, and it's not like you're sitting at home, saying, hey, I got some kids, and, where's the local barbecue this weekend? You're still playing competitive soccer, right? You're doing, you work out every day. You've got a lot of physical activity going on. So kind of describe like, what's the impact of all that physical activity plus building companies, investing, and is that a thing where you're doing the working out because it helps in that other stuff, or is it a thing where it's just more enjoyable personally?
Yeah, I think for me, I think balance is really important. And I think working hard is important. Like I challenge people. They talk about work-life balance. I think working hard is good. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't want to shame anyone for doing that. I think taking vacations are good. But I think to really pull this off in a big way, you got to eat right. You got to get sleep. You've got to drink water. I actually follow, I don't know if any of you follow, like, it's just a reminder to drink water every day.
It's my favorite account on Twitter.
Yeah, it's the greatest thing ever. It's like, drink water, idiot. Did you have water today? And they just insult you into drinking water. Breathing. I mentioned Wim Hof. I think it's really interesting tapping into like your reptile brain, that automatic nervous system, to be able to control that or call upon it in some instances is dope. So the combination of all that, super important to me. I'm 45, just turned 45, tore my ACL. The last time I tore my ACL, I was 40, playing rugby, semi-pro rugby. I still play competitive soccer, lift. I'm just trying to keep going after it. I'm not a big Bible guy, but there's a verse that I'm affected by it. It says, I want to master my body and make it my slave. I think it's really important because I've been in situations where my mind has betrayed me, where my body has betrayed me. And it's scary when that happens.
Well, and it's also a thing where you probably have more control of your body than you do your mind, right? And you can use your mind to control your body. So there's a.
But when those things fail, I don't know if you're a football player. I don't know if you've ever been in the air before and then been knocked out of position. So when you get in the air and you're turned, something weird happens. One, you get the slowness of your autonomic nervous system. You're very hyper aware of that rotation, but then it's scary. You don't know how to come out of it. So when you're flipping or turning, those are the type of situations I've unfortunately experienced 5 times. And the reason I'm saying 5 times, because I track them 5 times. I have 9 lives. I've used 5. one recently again. No, the 5th one was recent.
So let's talk about the, Jason was recently, I'm going to call it a plane crash because it's pretty damn close. You just tell a story about what happened when you're on this plane.
Yeah, so it was coming back from Turks and Caicos with my wife. I have 3 daughters, 16, 14, and 11-year-old, and our someone who works in our home, travels with us. We were all on this flight. I wasn't able to get seats together, so my wife and I were sitting together. One of my daughters was with our assistant, and the other 2 daughters were sitting together. We were 30 minutes into the flight, reached cruising altitude of 30,000 feet. They just turned the seatbelt lights off and said we could move around the cabin. And
you sound like a flight attendant.
Yeah, I mean this was serious stuff, man. I've flown all my life.
Yeah.
And there was an explosion, and then this noise. It went boom, and the plane turned to the right and started to drop. And I mean panic on the flight, like panic. Like people are.
It's like, not like, hey, this is some turbulence, and all of a sudden we're going to get through it. I'm talking about an
explosion on the right side of the plane, and then we're listing and dropping. My wife's freaking, like jumping out of her seat, trying to get someplace on the plane. I'm like trying to figure out instinctively, like, this is so stupid, but I was like, I would be okay if I was by myself. But I had this dreadful feeling like I'm not going to be okay because I can't save all these people. And then the next 20 minutes was just bananas.
Well, and just to remind everyone, you have 3 kids between the ages of 11 and 16.
Yeah, they were freaking out.
Scared out of their minds.
Everybody was freaking out. The stewardesses were freaking out. We were rotating down slowly. And, you know, on the back of the seat, there was the flight tracker. So I immediately put that on. I wanted to see how high we were and the speed we were going. So we were descending quickly. The plane was slowing down, and we were way off course. So we were between Turks and Caicos and Florida, and it looked like the pilot was trying to go to Miami. But then we were going the wrong direction. We were going back toward Nassau. The pilot eventually gets on the mic and says, look, what you heard was the right engine. It's no longer functioning. The plane is still flying with one engine. There's a long runway in Nassau. We're headed there, but they're mobilizing the crash, fire, everyone. And that's why we're turning above. I can only turn to the right. And we're just like getting prepared to crash land. Crazy. It was wild. But we safely landed. I mean, we safely landed with one engine. The fire crews, everything checked out. And we waited in Nassau, got on another plane, and that was it. Like, it was literally, we fell off the horse. No one wanted to get on another plane, but we couldn't. We weren't immigrated, or we hadn't immigrated into the country, even though I think Nassau is still part. But we weren't even allowed to leave the room. We had to, we had to get on another plane, flew to Atlanta, and then from there it's just regular flights and everything. But it was wild. It was wild.
What when they're like, hey, we're getting the crash landing people as precautionary or whatever, like, what are you thinking?
I just put my thumb up to the kids. I said it's going to be okay. If we go into the ocean, I'll just get on the wing. I'll paddle us back.
And I can imagine your wife and kids be like, why don't we land on the runway?
you know what? They're looking for any type of, like, they smiled at me.
Yeah,
because they were like, that's Dad.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. All right. So let's talk about Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto, and Morgan Creek. So we're doing all this mining stuff, and we eventually realized, like, hey, this stuff is real, and it's something we want to go focus on. Kind of walk us through the process from there to Morgan Creek.
Well, we construct the mine at PRTI. I jump on a plane with my COO, go to China, Hong Kong, Malaysia. I meet with Israeli hackers. I'm sourcing ASIC miners and parts. I want to understand, what they're seeing. Return to the States. You and I continue to deploy and close full tilt capital. I think in total we put about 16 million to work. 3 million in early stage, and the rest was in pre-IPO and late stage stuff. You get a call from Mark Yusko, have a few meetings with him, bring me into a few meetings with him.
We got to talk about the first meeting. I'm not letting you off the hook. So I'd met with Mark a couple of times for coffee, and if you listen to the episode with him, he's kind of told that story. But I finally say, all right, this is worth me and Jason both going and talking with Mark and trying to see if there's something to do here. And Jason and I went to the meeting separately. Jason drove straight from the PRTI plant. And for you guys can't see him most likely, but he's got a very big beard, and he's got a baseball cap on at the time, and he had a construction vest because you have to safety first on the plant, and obviously you got to have your reflective vest. And the way Mark tells the story is he's sitting in the room waiting for us to show up, and Jason walks in with a beard, a baseball cap, and a construction vest, and Mark literally says to himself, I really hope that this guy didn't bring some psycho in here.
Yeah, literally, Mark has a traditional palatial office. It's beautifully done. I think he built, an office environment that represented, the things that were important to him, and it's professional to a T, and that's Mark anyway. And I show up in construction boots, reflective vest, baseball hat, beard, tatted up. Like, what's up?
Ready to make money. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. So we ended up deciding that we're going to do this with Mark and Morgan Creek. What was kind of the reasoning why you were bullish or a proponent of it?
I think you and I, as CEOs, as people running a small venture fund, realized both the advantages and disadvantages of that world. Well, I don't think we could raise institutional money. I thought we had a very pure and convincing thesis. We understood the infrastructure around crypto. We navigated the world of ICOs well, and I think Mark brought gray hair and an institutional experience that we just didn't have, plus 40 FTEs, plus 15 years of investment experience. So he normalized us in a number of ways that we would never been able to do. Nouriel Roubini, his favorite go-to slam when he was trolling us is, these two are working out of a Starbucks bathroom.
Yeah, shout out Nouriel. What's up?
Yeah, where are you? I'm still here.
$3,000 Bitcoin looks pretty good now.
How many years to get a 4-year degree at NYU?
So, all right. So we do this, and I think people who have watched this or listened to this,
5.5.
Jason and Nouriel have a great relationship because Nouriel really went hard at the Starbucks start of Jason and I's investing career. And what Nouriel doesn't understand is that we wear that as a badge of honor, and if we could, we would still be in Starbucks. Whereas I think Nouriel thinks it's a negative. So you're actually just making our day when you say that. All right, I want to switch to as we start investing. You are one of the only people that I know that has dealt with the dark side of crypto and Bitcoin. And I will let you tell the story, but essentially you went through a number of security and hacking incidents that were pretty scary, right? So maybe kind of just tell some of that story and kind of how it all played out.
Yeah, so those events were all precluded by another major event, which was, I think, September 2017. I'm at PRTI. My wife answers the door. There are 2 FBI agents that have come to my house, and they want to meet with me. My wife texts me and says, hey, this is what's going on. I asked them, I get on the phone with them, I say, hey, what's up? They won't tell me, but they want to meet with me. So I tell them, we'll meet in Wakefield at the Dunkin Donuts. So on the way there, I'm trying to call my attorney because I'm like, dude, you're not supposed to meet with the FBI. Like, I know that this is not going to be good. Like, what? But my attorney's at lunch.
So that's why you invited them to your turf at Dunkin.
To Dunks, yeah. I knew I could escape if I needed to. No, but the only thing that gave me kind of comfort as I walked into the Dunks was, look, if you always tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said. Mm-hmm. So I try to do that. Mm-hmm. So I sit down. I've got a camo hat on, Ray-Bans, beard, reflective vest, my normal look, and I'm sitting in the back of Dunks. Dude, it's like right out of a movie. Guys drive up, black truck, 2 guys in suits, beeline right to me. Like, I don't even know who I am. They've got a manila folder with them, and they sit down.
The beard, the Ray-Bans, and the hat didn't. I don't know. It didn't work to keep them from knowing who you were.
Yeah. So anyway, they sit down. They're like, hey, I'm whatever, and this is whoever. We want to talk to you about certain things, but they first want to go through my background, like who, what, where, when, why, and how. Mm-hmm. They know about my cars. They know about my patents. They know about my education. They apparently had my bank account records, which was concerning. Like so I don't think you can just get that information. Mm-hmm. So they were looking for something. They asked me about foreign travel, all this stuff. Well, it came down to mining. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the FBI had been looking at mining since the beginning. Mm-hmm. And this was a special dark web task force that was based in Charlotte, North Carolina, that was looking for bad actors in the space, but also looking for information in the space. And, I told them what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I told them why I was doing it. They came out to PRTI and took a look at it.
And ultimately, that's what the thing was. They were essentially, if I remember correctly, they were basically saying, look, you've bought a lot of these.
Yeah, they knew.
GPUs
I spent millions of dollars that I sent to China.
Yep.
I imported these computers. They were just like, why are you buying all this compute? What are you doing?
Yep.
So I think it was difficult for them to understand that I was also running my own power company. Mm-hmm. So they weren't necessarily seeing the power on the grid. Like if you were running a meth lab, the reason they find you is because of the power consumption.
Yep.
They weren't seeing it. It was like all this compute's disappearing.
Same thing in Venezuela, right? How did the police figure out who's mining cryptocurrency, even though it's outlawed? They look and see there's a spike in the energy consumption in a single home, right? Yeah. That's way too big of a spike. There's got to be something going on.
Same thing's happening in Malaysia right now, too. They're busting these clandestine mines that are running. So anyway.
And just so people remember, the reason why they couldn't see there was no spike in energy consumption was because
it's off the grid.
It's all off the grid. It's self-generated power.
Yeah, so imagine if someone's importing, because this is me getting wrecked, but I bought ASIC miners for $2,800 a rig. So a small ASIC mine for me is 500 rigs. So you're talking $1.4 million worth of computers that I'm bringing in. You've got aluminum extrusion issues at the border, so they're getting stuck there. Pallets of ASIC miners. Like, I'm not off the grid. Like, everybody's looking, saying, what are you doing? But anyway, so that's it. I have access to the FBI by text message because they've made themselves available to me now. They're like, yo, you're legit. If you find anyone doing some crazy stuff, tell us. And will you come and speak to our officers about Monero, crypto, they privacy tokens?
They come and they do their work. And I think that, one, they're like, oh, okay, like we understand now. It all makes sense why there's no easily visible, traceable energy consumption. We understand the computers. We've seen the site, all this stuff. Like, this is actually pretty cool, right? We would love to stay close as you kind of continue learning and building stuff. But also, please let us know if we can ever do anything to help, or if there's things that, we may ask you to come educate, etc. Right. So it went from hey, what the hell is this guy doing, to oh, this is actually pretty cool, and let's keep a relationship.
Yeah. Again, my attorney says you never know who the target of an FBI investigation is. So, whatever that means, that made me feel better. So, but then all hell breaks loose in November. So, I can't recall exactly where I was, but I'll tell you retrospectively, this was always happening on a Saturday night or Sunday. I think I was in Jamaica, maybe I forget, but I was definitely overseas. It's about 12 o'clock at night, 12 a.m. And my SIM card goes off. And I immediately, because I've been, reading about this stuff, I understand enough. I'm like, oh crap, I'm being SIM swapped. So phone goes off. I grab my computer. By the time I get to log in, they've already changed my passwords. So I've not in my email. So now they're going through the process of changing my passwords, banking, etc. And unfortunately, this goes on for a long time. I've had a lot of money stolen from me, death threats.
Well, so all right. So the first time it happens, it is they essentially get in, they SIM swap you, right? They're able to change passwords and kind of do what I would consider is everyone's greatest fear, right? Which is they get control. Yeah. Right. And once they get control, they can do all kinds of crazy stuff. You being in the position of I've now lost control of my phone number, right, and some of my accounts. There's not a lot you can do other than you start calling people and trying to get back control and doing all this stuff.
Yeah, but you can't call anyone. See, this is the thing. Most people carry one cell phone. Now, if I take your cell phone out, you lose cell service. You have Wi-Fi, so you can still receive text. But for the most part, you're out. And this is happening Saturday night and Sundays. So the fraud prevention departments of AT&T are closed on Sundays. So the hackers know that if they're going to SIM swap you, it's going to be on probably a Sunday. Once that goes down, they can communicate to you by text. And they have a mirror image of your phone. So any apps you have, they now know where to go. Coinbase, Gemini, Slush Pool. So they know, oh, you're a minor, and they immediately can do things. So I've had to learn super hard lessons, Pomp, in regards to all of these things, whether it's hot wallets, cold wallets, exchanges, mining. For example, one of the hard lessons was if you're mining on Slush Pool, you can permanently place an address for your deposits of your mine and lock it forever. And once you do that, it cannot be changed. I didn't know that. The hackers did. So once they hacked into my Slush Pool account, they were able to change that destination and steal a mine. Well, and if you're overseas or someplace, I mean, you're just screwed.
Well, and to me, the part that was crazy was when it happened, it was like, whoa, we just got a crash course, right? Because not just you, it's everyone around you. Now it's like, whoa, what just happened? How did that work, right? And it forced everyone kind of in our circle to really look at security
next level
and all this stuff. The second incident, right, which was where I think kind of the FBI and more comes in, is I remember all of a sudden you started frantically texting me saying like they're trying to hack me again. Right,
because I could recognize when it was happening. I would start getting pinged like my passwords were being changed, and I could defend it. So now I have 3 cell phones and 2 computers, multiple services that I'm using, and I can defend myself a little bit here. So I could rapidly change passwords. I've locked some things down. I've got dummy apps on my phone to put people off. So I may not have a Binance account, but they may think I do. You know, so they're wasting time going after that. There's nothing there.
Well, and so what they did is you'd basically put defense in place, and then what they started to do was, rather than spend the time to hack into all this, just directly threaten you and get you to engage in giving them Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, so they would directly, they would attack everything. So your Dropbox accounts, everything, your social media accounts. They would solicit investment deals through my contacts, ask for money. I think they did that with you as well, right? Hey, can you send me a few Bitcoin? There were other things that we were really concerned about, SWAT attacks. So a SWAT attack is where they'll say, Jason has shot his wife.
Here's the
home.
address.
There's an active shooter at his home address. The SWAT team shows up, imagine in the middle of the night, and then you're responding to that. So you have this fog of war thing going on, and people get hurt. They do that to your work as well. So imagine my industrial plant, a SWAT attack. So we're worried about that. They threatened to kidnap my middle daughter. And the unfortunate thing about that, when people make threats, it's like whatever. But they had specific information that was really concerning. So when I contacted the local police department, they thought I was crazy.
They're not prepared to deal with this.
They showed up to my house, but they wouldn't even come in. But I said, look, this is what's going on. Here's the FBI's phone number, because the FBI was on this. They contacted the FBI agents and came in my house. At that point, they were like, I'm way outclassed. This is above my pay grade. You can hire me and my buddies to help give you some protection. We'll increase coverage in the area, put more patrols here. Do you have a gun? Can you protect yourself? I mean, it was literally like I had to turn into some type of person I'm not. Like, look, I told you I like to eat right and breathe, but I'm not like the Terminator, So, but that's what they were expecting. They were like, the police are not there. They can't protect you.
Yeah.
Like, they show up once the bad stuff happens.
Yeah. Or either while it's going on or after it's over.
And believe me, I love the police. Thank you for all you do. But you're not standing next to me when someone tries to abduct my daughter, and that's really what they asked me to do, is like hunker down and
it's scary.
Yeah, it's scary because, again, it's like my kid's on that plane. Like, what do I do, Pomp? Do I sit down with the family and say, this is probably not real, but someone's trying to kidnap you, Molly? I mean, I don't think that you do that, but I don't know what to do.
13-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you do that, but I don't know what to do. I just don't have, as a parent, I don't have the rule book. I don't have the guide for that. So, I did the best I could. It's frightening. I know that they've doxed and stolen all our demographic information, the whole families. They have all my personal information. So, at this point, my mother's maiden name, all the things that you think are like, you seek, like you're going through a process to validate who you are. I just think it's a joke. I mean, I literally was supposed to be on like a celebrity level protection inside my phone carrier, and they failed. I mean, they failed. It's a bad situation. It's scary how fast someone can steal all of your information from a phone carrier, how easy it is to do.
Well, and I think a lot of people at this point, you just have to operate as if you're guaranteed that your information's out there, because if someone's got some money, got access to the dark web, they're likely to be able to go buy personal information on almost anybody, right? There's been so many hacks at this point of major, internet services or insurance companies,
Equifax, whatever,
all these guys.
Yeah.
That it's just it's out there, right? And so it's a really unfortunate scenario. One, thankfully, that there was a little bit more bark than bite when it came to a lot of the threats and things like that. But the reason why I just tell the story,
I think they arrested the kid. I got information from the FBI that they made an arrest. So we'll see what comes out of that. But they found the person. It was a group, but they got one of them so far. So,
I mean, and the reason why I wanted to tell the story is
which is really interesting, right? Hackers. Make note. Yeah, you got caught. Yeah,
that they can, exactly.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet you.
All right, so I want to go from hackers to Twitter. Jason, I endearingly call the GIF God, which that's GIF for those of you at home who don't know what a GIF is. They are the little animated videos that people post. What's the Twitter strategy? What's going on there?
Yeah, like Pomp is he's a great speaker. as Mark is. And they're both great writers. I'm very envious of that. I've worked hard to try to speak clearly in my life and convey messages as clearly as possible. Writing them down is a little more difficult. Twitter makes it really hard, right? To convey a message concisely without losing the essence of what you're trying to say on Twitter. It's an art. It really is. But even better than writing is a GIF. It's like the best thing ever. I literally just have millions of options to convey my exact feelings in a GIF.
You have a skill. My favorite thing that you do is when the haters come out and they always self-select. They make it very obvious that they are upset. You use the clams. Where did this come from? So you send gifts.
Clams, marinara. I don't know. I just love to like clams, salty clams. That they're clammy, just chattering clams, man. That's just I love it.
And unlike Mark and
how did you even notice that?
Well, when you hit somebody with 6 clam gifts in a row, I'm like, what is he doing? And then I'm like, oh, he's calling you clammy. He's calling you salty. I got it.
That's it.
But you don't block anybody. You don't mute anybody. Mark and I are both now in the camp of block early and often and just stop the madness. But you engage with them all.
Yeah, those that are persistent and stable, they get the clam. But I really tapped into a nuance that I missed when I was younger, when I was your age. When I dropped out of Yale and started FastMed, I was working for an orthopedic surgical practice because that was really my training. I was doing that nights and weekends to raise money to make all this work. And I had a really dear friend there. His name was Eric Carlson. He was a 39-year-old orthopedic surgeon and recently married, had a 2-year-old daughter. And we played golf together. He was like just a great guy, and he put a shotgun in his mouth and blew himself away on his 40th birthday. And the suicide letter said he didn't have any friends, essentially. And I was like, what? Like I was hurt by that, but I also really started to think, man, I'm a selfish bastard. Like I didn't recognize that this guy needed me in some way. I wasn't paying attention. I'm always focused on me. And I know that a lot of times that impulsive move, the suicide move, can be circumvented by a moment of question or some person reaching out or doing something, Pom. That's kind of resonated with me at this point in my life. So being a human, when someone's coming at me, I'm really just trying to find, are you just a jerk off? Or is there something wrong? Because a lot of these people are kids that they're listening to a lot of information. Their whole lives are focused on themselves. So
it's very easy to get sucked into depression, all this stuff on social media.
Big time. People are living their best life, but 99% of it is nonsense. So for me, before you get to clam, you're going to get a moment of humanity. And all I'm doing is, it's so easy. I'm not going to block you, but I am going to treat you like a human. Until you get the sauce.
The contrast between the humanity and the clam is amazing.
Yeah. Especially if you get clammed up.
People are going to go find the clam gift now. They're like, that's what he's been doing.
There's a bunch of them, man.
I know there are.
So good.
A lot of times somebody will troll me, I'll block them, and next thing I know, I'm getting notifications that you're sending clam gifts, which I appreciate.
I try to defend you guys. You and Mark deserve it.
All right. One of the ideas that you have that I think is pretty cool is this idea around quantum computing. And I think that quantum computing a lot of times gets associated with Bitcoin and blockchains. And, you'll see the people on Twitter who literally say, when quantum computing comes, this is all over, right? You have a very interesting view of we already have quantum computing. Maybe describe a little about what you mean by that.
Yeah. So a long time ago, I was very, very interested in quantum physics. So if you've studied quantum physics, it lays into Buddhism and the philosophies around there. So any of these unmeasurable or very difficult things to measure were really interesting to me. Quantum computing, some would say, exists today, and it exists in the form of quantum biology. So biologic processes that are at such a small level, it's like if you typed a 0 on a page. So you have the typeset and size of a typical 0. If you fit the whole United States in that 0, that's the level that I'm talking about of size. These things happen. Like I believe, and through kind of my own studies, that that quantum biology and the processes that are going on at that level are realer than people think. So quantum computing is probably not fiction, but something that is there. And that computer will look like some type of chemical soup versus its form factor that you see today. There are amazing scientific discoveries that are happening now in the last 2 decades that are absolutely incredible. There are some cool books, Life on the Edge. You got to check out that book.
What's that one about?
It's a book on quantum biology. So essentially, the beginning of the book talks about the migratory patterns of a European robin, which lots of animals migrate. But what is so interesting about the migratory pattern of the European robin is it's not driven by sight or smell or a repetitive migration. These birds can sense the magnetic fields of the Earth. Now, for something to chemically engage or biologically engage with a magnetic field isn't necessarily uncommon. That's just an MRI, right? What I do with an MRI is I hit you with a magnet, I grab onto molecules, I orient them in a way, and then I drop that magnetic field, and it takes an amazing picture. So we know how this stuff kind of works, right? Again, an MRI is quantum mechanics or quantum machine. It's an example of it. Well, these birds can actually see the magnetic field, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm talking about being able to see magnetic fields. They think it's coming through like blue light spectrum, photons in their eyes, rods and cones can actually see that. And I can't remember the scientists who identified it, but this is all recent stuff. I think it's absolutely amazing. And it's a part of the thing that's always been inspiring to me and why I'm into robotics. It's we have those same kind of mechanisms and machines that are going on in our body right now. Again, just the fact of us seeing, Pomp, is miraculous, right? When you step back and you think, light's going into my eye, there's an explosion of chemicals that are engaging my optic nerve. That optic nerve is transmitting an electric signal into my brain, and then it's mashing up into chemicals again, right? The most powerful computer ever. Human brain.
Completely agree. And it's one of these things where I actually believe a lot of technologists could benefit greatly from better understanding the science of a lot of this stuff, right? If you really look at even just something simple like the social platforms that we have, the way that information is consumed, the way that information is passed through societies, etc. And if you overlap that with the scientific understanding of a brain, how a brain consumes information, how it processes it, what side of the brain, how does it engage, images versus not images, right? When you really start to look at the science behind this stuff, it's powerful information. It can be used for good or bad, right? So if I really understand how to make an image or a statement resonate inside of your brain, because I understand the science of what goes on, and somebody else doesn't, I actually have an advantage to bend the way that you think, right? And influence the way that you think. And so I think that a lot of folks are naive and that we don't understand that stuff, or they don't take the time to really learn, because the people who do have that significant advantage.
Yeah, I mean, we've had to face this as investors and as humans on this planet. You and I in particular, you know, we invested in a company that was one of the world's first to make a complete glass representation down to the neuron of a brain, mammalian brain. Their pursuit is, one, for better imaging techniques, but really what they want to do is preserve grandma after she passes away and connect her brain to a computer and store her memories and harness the computing capacity of a brain. Now, you pitch that to someone in a Starbucks, 90% of people are going to have an ethical issue with that. The other 9% are going to say, is this going to be used for evil? I would think. And then some will be compelled to continue to develop the science. You know, would you go and get Neuralink, Pomp? Would you have that implanted capability?
So I am convinced that humanity will all have implants at some point. I think that it's less of a question of like, hey, if it was fully functioning, you know, a medical device that was tested and approved and safe and all of that, I think people are all, you know, either lying or tricking themselves if they say they wouldn't go get it, right?
Right, because isn't it just the next level biometric device, right?
It's the same thing as glasses.
Are you wearing an Apple Watch?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're monitoring some...
Well, what's the difference between it being on my wrist and under my skin?
Well, I would say it'd be more advantageous for it to be implanted.
And if I didn't have to charge it?
You don't have to do anything.
You just go through all this stuff, right?
Right.
Why
How about if you could recall the internet, all that's on the internet, just by thinking about it, not wearing some device, but actually engaging it. So we don't have to remember which scientist.
What do you think an AirPod's doing, right? It's getting closer and closer to an embeddable device. And if you didn't have to put headphones in and take them out, it would essentially be the experience of, you know, when somebody has like a little earpiece in and they're able to hear talking, whether it's on television or at a show or whatever, that you're able to process information in a different form factor and a different mechanism that's super, super powerful. But I think the bigger question is not, will you do it? It's what is the milestone that needs to be hit until you and I say, okay, I'm ready to do this. And then what is the milestone that needs to be hit for the mainstream audience to say, okay, now this is a consumer, you know, device, just like getting glasses is a medical situation. Okay, now we're all going to go get implants, right? Or I'm going to do it to my kid, right? And do that. I think that
well, those are the ethical dilemmas that I'm struggling with today. Like, you know, one of the things that's most intriguing to me recently is genomics and blockchain, right? So genomics and blockchain. There's a bunch of companies, Nebula, one of them. And the reason I bring that up,
there's a bunch
right. This guy Church is a savage in the space who is behind that. But, you know, I worry about protected healthcare information. Like, how do you protect not just what I did the last time I went to a doctor, but my genetic information? Like, how do you really protect that?
Well, and what you're highlighting, right, I think is today the world really revolves on passwords, right? So how do I permission myself or others into all kinds of different software and even physical locations, right? It's passwords. Now, I may type a password into my computer. I may punch in a 4-digit code to get in a door, to access my money, right? All this. There's pins and passwords, basically. We are moving towards a biometric type situation where the recognition of my face, the recognition of my voice, the recognition of my fingertips, right, or my fingerprints, that stuff is much more secure than the passwords.
Maybe.
Right? Unless it gets stolen, right? Or
AI gets so good.
Yeah, it's easy to basically manipulate it. And so I think that we're headed towards a world where most likely the most secure information in order to unlock things is going to be some sort of genetic predisposition, information, something around those genetics. There's a lot of work to be done on identifying what that stuff is, how it works, how do you surface it, how do you keep it secure, right? All that kind of stuff. But if all of a sudden genetics goes from like a, hey, do a 23andMe and I can tell you what countries your ancestors come from, to you can access your money with that genetic code and that genetic information, it becomes a lot more important. And I don't think that people are kind of looking around the corner and realizing how important it can become over time.
Have you ever participated in sharing your DNA with anyone?
No.
See, I won't do it either. I mean, I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but I just won't do it for that reason. It's like the ultimate identifier.
Yeah.
Like you can go through a multi-stage, multifactorial biometric screen. Eyes, fingerprint, facial recognition, voice tone, intonation. But the DNA is probably the only way to do it, right? That's the foolproof way. But can you copy someone's DNA?
Well, and for me, so I can't say I had some master plan as to why I didn't do the DNA stuff. I'm just cheap, right? It's like $300, and I'm not paying $300. I don't care where my ancestors came from. I'm Italian. I've been Italian my whole life.
I was going to say,
if I find out anything different, I'm gonna be mad. So that was really why I didn't do it at first. But eventually, when I started to hear the stories of, hey, look, is this DNA information being sold to companies? Is it being given and processed in other countries?
I mean, look
right?
what happened recently, where one of those companies that does like ancestry, I think it may be called Living Tree or something, they turned over their files to the FBI, who then went through it looking for criminals. I don't, regardless of whether you're a criminal or not, I don't think that's why those people shared their DNA,
of course,
with that company.
Yeah. Well, and it brings a bigger question, right? Is not only what companies get your DNA information, but what information should these companies have on you at all, right? And it's the genetic data is kind of the most sensitive, probably the most valuable, because it is impossible to replicate for you, right? And kind of that genetic signature, if you will. But there's other information, right, that we give very easily, right? And I continue to just think, just your location data, right? Just giving that to services because it makes it more convenient has ramifications that I recently saw somebody was tracked down. So I don't remember exactly how it works, but basically there's a shadow GPS essentially on your cell phone. The cell phone company has that information. It's kind of like the last tower you ping type thing. They sell that data. I believe it's anonymized, but they sell that data to other companies. There's a woman who is suing one of the, I think it's a cell phone company, because somebody bought the data and was able to track her down or use it to locate her. It's supposed to be anonymized, supposed to be all stuff. All she did was have a cell phone, right? She's not thinking about, can somebody who's a bad actor, or, I don't remember all the details, but by getting this cell phone, I didn't know that I was going to put myself in physical safety risk. But that's what she did. Right. And it's pretty scary when you start to think of all the data that you generate that we just hand over to other companies because we don't even realize it.
Yeah, I don't think that the cell phone companies understood the level of security that they really needed to put in place when they did what they did, which is they have all your financial data, they have all of your demographic information, and then the cell phone is essentially your mobile wallet. At that point, it's such a point vector of attack, like an issue that you have to resolve. You almost have to go through a regression of technology back to analog to protect yourself. Flip phone, pager, smartphone needs to be airlocked or air gapped, that's what I kind of do. The airplane mode.
And part of it too is what happens.
Do you answer your phone?
If it's a number I don't know, no.
Never.
Yeah. And part of it's robocalling. Some of it's because I don't want to deal with it.
Never.
Right? It's just,
unless it comes up as someone that I know, I never answer the phone.
Yeah, same. And I don't have a voicemail set up.
No voicemail.
Right. It's just look, if you need me, you'll figure it out. The other thing too is as these devices become more and more embeddable or get closer to being embedded, I think a lot about what happens when the digital wallet is embedded in our body. Right. Or you've got some sort of embeddable in your brain, and there is that security component of, well, could it get hacked? Right. And I remember as a kid, I wish I remembered the movie, but there's a movie and the vice president has a pacemaker. And basically, the plot is somebody gets into the office and they go and they find the box that the pacemaker came out of, and they get the serial number. Somebody hacks the pacemaker and they basically kill the vice president. Right.
You know that hack has happened, but not with pacemakers. It was with insulin pumps.
Really?
You should read about that. They've hacked insulin pumps, and as you can imagine, that can
just start jacking up the insulin that's injected.
I don't know what they did, but I know that there was a vulnerability in insulin pumps for hacks. So these are really relevant discussions.
Yeah, and it's scary.
Super scary.
Right? And I always go to, like, forget yourself. Like, what if your child, right, or your father or your mother or somebody you love, that happens to them, right? Because to yourself, you're kind of like, look, you have the bias of believing that it won't happen to you, right? But it's, what if it happens to somebody that you know, and all of a sudden the insulin just gets jacked up and ends up, killing them?
No, it's crazy, and it's not acceptable. So we have to come up with solutions to this stuff. We have to come up with solutions.
For sure. One of the last things I want to talk about is universal healthcare, because you've got this deep background in healthcare and understand what I would consider more kind of boots on the ground view of how healthcare in America works today. I will caveat the question with I was listening to Joe Rogan's recent podcast with Bernie Sanders, right? And admittedly, my view of a lot of the rhetoric and kind of the ideas was not super positive, right, from what he did. But in listening to it, it was very interesting to hear him talk about U.S. healthcare versus Canadian healthcare, the cost, the quality, who pays the cost, etc. And it reminded me a lot of the universal healthcare conversation here in the United States. What's kind of your take on the U.S. healthcare system? Is things like universal healthcare possible? Are they net benefit, net negative? How do we compare to other countries? Just kind of like, how do you think about this, like on a more structural, kind of platform for U.S. healthcare?
Yeah, so I'll start the kind of discussion that I think healthcare is a right, a human right, not a privilege. I'm also going to say that in the United States, we actually do a fantastic job of providing healthcare to people. And I will always defend my position by doing this. If you feel right now you're having some type of medical issue, emergency, what have you, if you call 911, someone will come and provide you with the basic healthcare. They will triage you and potentially transport you to a U.S. emergency department where they're obligated to provide you treatment without proving a source of pay.
Yep.
So right there, you're so far ahead of most countries that don't have a universal healthcare system. All right. On top of that, the United States really expedites procedures. Like, we're super good at getting things done. If you need an MRI, you can pretty much get an MRI. Whereas if you travel around the world, it becomes less obvious, less available. Canada, you're going to be in a queue. In Europe, you're in a queue. Procedures, joint replacement, it's not going to happen. You're going to be put in a queue. In the United States, you're going to get access to it, but you're going to need health insurance for that. So my general feeling is healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Can we do universal healthcare? We've got a really good system in place now. It could be made better. We need to figure out a way to not exclude people with pre-existing conditions. That is just a non-starter. You got to be able to provide an insurance program for everyone. That being said, the healthy of us have to pay. So I'm not one that is afraid to pay taxes, and I would go so far as to say, put a healthcare tax in place. I'm okay with that. and provide some basic level of healthcare to every U.S. citizen, I don't think that's undoable. I don't think that's undoable.
Do you think that the quality of care that is provided today is too expensive?
No, it's fraught with too many errors.
Okay,
so there's a tremendous amount of wasted dollars in healthcare due to medical errors, and the number is extraordinary. I don't want to misquote it. It's greater than 20%. It may even be 30, 40% of U.S. healthcare dollars are spent on issues, fraud, mistakes, medical mismanagement. It's just a mess, Pomp. When I started in healthcare, we were working with paper systems. It moved on to something called a T chart, which was essentially a homunculus man, where we pulled a piece of paper that was specific to the disease process in the area of the disease, and now we have electronic medical records, patient portals, integrated healthcare systems, bidirectional interfaces around technology, but it's still a mess because one hospital system can't talk to the next. One private physician who's outside of that healthcare organism can't communicate with it. So they're still faxing paper around. So that's what we're dealing with today. So the potential of blockchain technology enhancing this healthcare system and decreasing fraud, decreasing pharmaceutical issues, decreasing miscommunication and medical errors could be a boom for healthcare, and find dollars that were already in the system. Use them appropriately.
And do you feel like when you say errors, is that like fraudulent stuff where people are basically lying and there's money changing hands, etc., or is that more a structural issue where one of the things that Bernie Sanders talked about in the podcast that I did not know is a lot of the drug companies are able to manipulate the prices and rise prices without competition and also without warning. Right, so today you can go and you can buy a drug and come back 3 weeks later.
Worse than that. It's worse than that. I wish I could sit down with Bernie and really tell him about what PBMs do. So when you go to the pharmacy and you present your insurance card for a certain drug, whether it's brand or generic, if it's a brand name drug, there are tiers, tier 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. That PBM was supposed to find you the lowest cost for that drug. It's not. It actually does the reverse. It gives that particular retail pharmacy the highest price that they can bill the insurance company for the drug. For example, I picked up a prescription recently for something, and the price of it, because it was outside of my insurance, was $300. The pharmacy tech goes, "Hold on a second, I think I have a coupon for that." And she goes, "Yeah, we do. $30. And I go, "Okay, stop. That's amazing. I have to get this every month. You're telling me you just took a prescription I have to pay $300 a month for down to $30? What is this?" It's a program called GoodRx. I think that's the name of it, GoodRx. It's essentially someone very smart went into the PBM and helps you find the correct lowest price for that particular drug, and they print it out as a coupon.
It's a 90% discount simply because somebody actually looked at the right price.
The price that it wasn't incentivized in the wrong way. Profit over healthcare, profit over integrity, profit over morality, profit over everything good about healthcare. No, it's about profit. On top of that, CVS can sell liquor and candy and bullshit. Well, the regular doctor or me that was competing against retail pharmacies that had urgent cares inside of them, I don't sell Kit Kats. How can you even do that?
Well, it goes to this idea of...
and they used to sell cigarettes too. Do they sell Juul?
Probably. Should we talk about Juul?
Nah.
Are you sure?
Can if you want.
So we looked at the Juul investment and we passed. Jason is 2 for 2 on passing on multi-billion-dollar companies that are in and around healthcare and science, both of which ended up having issues. We'll start with
Theranos.
with the first one, which is Theranos. Maybe tell that story real quick.
Yeah, so this is 2011, 2012. Blue Cross Blue Shield actually asked me to do diligence on Theranos. Flew out, met with, I think his name's Balaji. It was the COO who was eventually dating Elizabeth, which I didn't know at the time. Went through the full business. I was intrigued with her claims that they could do 2,000 laboratory tests from a finger stick. I'd been practicing medicine for a long time. And, this was one of two things. Either a miracle invention where she had a box that could do this off a finger stick, or they were using mass spectrophotometry or gas chromatography. There had to be some real science behind it to do this, and I didn't think you could get the results from a finger stick. So I flew out to the West Coast to meet with them, and they wouldn't show me the technology. I mean, it was that simple, Pomp. Again, it's what I said to you before. I have to touch things, see them, interface with them. If you want me to invest in a jacket company, well, get me the jacket. Let's see what this thing looks like. They wouldn't show it to me. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, there were some heavy hitters that are already invested at that point. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had just a bunch of them, major people on their board, et cetera. And Elizabeth was a very compelling and convincing young woman. I went back, we passed on the investment.
And then the second is Jewel. And when we looked at that, it was almost an immediate, these guys are going to get in trouble with regulators. You can't sell this to kids.
Yeah, I looked at the packaging. When you're talking about flavored tobacco, it just reminded me of when I was a kid in Queens. I'd go to the corner store and you'd buy like candy cigarettes. Mm-hmm. I mean, just the fact of me saying you could buy candy cigarettes is ridiculous. I remember. Candy cigarettes, come on. You can't do that. And I mean, they spanked the cigarette companies hard.
Yep.
I mean, they're crushing them out of business right now with Golden Leaf, et cetera. The penalties are extraordinary. Juul it will, if not has, faced the same demise. I mean, it's just, and I don't know, it's just not the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it brings me to this point of holistic healthcare, right? Where if you really look at, I do it all the time. I've got a bunch of friends now that are having kids, and they're kind of, I'll say newborn to 5, maybe some have 6-7 year olds, right? That I'm close with. And you see the photos and their kids are, they're not grossly obese, but they're not skinny, right? And there's a couple of these photos you look at and you're like, actually that kid, every time I see a picture of him, got ice cream in his hand, right? Or has got, candy, or has got something on his mouth that's green and blue and red and doesn't look like natural food, right? And you kind of start to realize, like, would we be better off simply going to your point of, like, maybe we don't sell the candy and all this other stuff in the same place where we sell the medicine to then cure the stuff that came from the candy, right? Would we be better off teaching people from a very young age that, look, sugar can absolutely ravage your health over a long period of time, right? The things that you put in your body are important and they have, an impact. And not even just saying, like, hey, don't eat candy, but actually explaining, this is what is scientifically happening in your body when you eat this, right? And could we educate people into being healthier? Because frankly, I never got any of that education, right? In the traditional schooling system, you just, what's 2 + 2, right? How do you write and how do you do this? But never anything that actually, could have a massive impact on a national scale if everyone was educated about things we were putting in our bodies.
Yeah, I think I have the most hope that I ever have around this call for transparency with your generation. Mm-hmm. You've had access to more information than any person that's ever walked the planet, and I think you all have figured out some legacy problems that my generation and those before didn't understand. You're marrying differently. You're not getting divorced as frequently. I think you will be a healthier population. I think you're incredibly ambitious, and you're incredibly smart and have created amazing businesses. But this is about transparency, and there's some really cool science out there now about adding energy to food. Mm-hmm. And bioavailability. I mean, at another time, I'd love to talk about that. If you charge or reorient molecules correctly, they become more bioavailable. And our food has been so processed and so denatured that you just don't get the power that it used to give you when you eat it. If you can replace that power, which I think there are technologies that can do that. Now we're kind of back in the quantum science, quantum biology world. Things change. The effectiveness of drugs, you can decrease the dosage, increase the bioavailability. You can do that with food. You can do that with a number of things. So I think it's an amazing time to be alive. You've said that a number of times. I think Bitcoin is real, and I think some of the issues that we're facing right now as a population on this planet are real, and I hope we take them seriously.
Before I do the rapid fire, many don't know, but your favorite music group, Wu-Tang Clan. Where the obsession come from? Wu-Tang?
Yeah. No, thanks for finally giving a shout out to Wu-Tang Clan.
I'm a much more NWA over Wu-Tang.
No, I love it, man. No, Wu-Tang Clan. So coming out of high school in Florida, we were listening to like Miami bass. So I got to my freshman year at Methodist. My roommate was a soccer player from Edison, New Jersey. And he literally had like DOS Effects, Onyx, and Wu-Tang Clan. I'd never heard it before. And so as soon as I heard it, it was over. Like Method Man, Raekwon the Chef, Ghostface Killer. It was just too much, man. And that's 25 years.
Crazy.
25 years. If you get a chance to watch the Showtime, there's 4 episodes of, I think it's of Mikes and Men. It really is great. It's fantastic.
It's all about Wu-Tang?
It's about Wu-Tang Clan, and they're just the way they approach music, and they're still relevant today. I mean, I just heard a new Wu-Tang song yesterday with the Jizza and some new relevant guys. I mean, it's incredible.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So yeah, Wu-Tang.
For the rapid fire, most important company in crypto or Bitcoin?
The most important company in crypto and Bitcoin. I've answered that before. It's Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin.
What's the one regulation you would change or improve if you could?
Man, I'd get rid of qualified purchaser, accredited investor. I absolutely hate it. I just think it's wrong. I think it's wrong.
Why?
I mean, look, I'm doing this stuff today, this whole fund business, investing and working to help my friends and people who believe in this thesis to gain access into venture and private equity, because their only options were to have a job, to become self-employed, to become a business owner, or to potentially make enough money to invest. And I think those are all okay, but they're not the same as the returns that these venture guys are getting. And I couldn't get access to that. Now I can, but you get there by being successful. I don't think that's fair. I think anyone should have the chance to look across the room and say, you know what, I think Lyft is a good investment. Like I like using it. I'd like to own that company. And they should be allowed to buy that. They should be able to buy it on the pre-IPO. Should have access to it.
Well, and they can own it in the public market only after the largest returns have already been captured.
Yeah, of all the value's been extracted prior to it going into the public market, and you're seeing that now.
Especially as companies stay private later.
Stay private. Yeah, you're seeing that now. So it's just not fair. Yeah, it's not fair. I change that.
What's the most controversial thing you'll say in crypto or Bitcoin so when people hear it, they will disagree with you?
Most controversial thing that I say in crypto that people will disagree with me?
Yeah, like what's the most controversial thought you have?
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you like a Bitcoin SV guy?
No, not at all. Not at all. My most controversial thought. Yeah, I don't know if I have a real controversial position in Bitcoin. The thing that happens to us, unfortunately, is we're kind of like in this micro environment where it's a big world for us. So, I'm always sorting out everything, but it's really small still. It's really small. The most controversial thing for me is probably where I think it's going. you know, and I try to tell people this is one of those moments that you should go all in on. And I think that's what's controversial. They just don't see it.
Most important book you've ever read?
You know, it's probably that's a great question, actually. This is a great question. It's probably a culmination of a number of books. So when I was a little kid, and I don't even know what the title of these books are, Pomp, but they were books that while you read them, you could be on like page 30 and it would give you a choice.
Oh,
it would say,
the choose your own adventure books.
Yeah. It would say like, if you choose A, go to page 50. If you choose B, I loved it. It was like I could change the scope. I could change the path of what was happening. So I used to read those books all the time. And then it's like The Road Less Traveled, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's like Covey and Peck. You know, those books really kind of framed my perspective.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, I love all that stuff.
Aliens.
Definitely.
Aliens in the Moon.
Yeah, well, let's, like, aliens, I think, are totally there. Like, I mean, if we spent more time together, you'd understand, like, my whole feelings about life. Like, the only reason, like, one of the things that we haven't been able to do is make life from rocks. But life is rocks, right? The same parts and components that are in a rock are life. We just haven't figured out what drives that life force, right? But you have things like organelles in your body right now that are bacteria that weren't parts of you, like a mitochondria. A mitochondria has its own shit. Like it's its own powerhouse. It's got its own kind of DNA. It's a bacteria, but it's inside your cells. So you've brought that in so it can make you live and be the person you are. So aliens don't look like I think we think they look, but they're everywhere. So they're here. They're here on the planet. They're everywhere. They're in every part of the universe, you know. And when the fourth nation, India, lands their rover on the moon on September 7th, you know, I hope they find life. You know, I'm so excited for them that they're doing that.
It's coming up.
It's September 7th. You know, India. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I think they may be in orbit around the moon right now. But it's amazing.
Do you think it's a thing where there's life on other planets and out in the solar system, and we either haven't seen it yet, or we don't have the tools to actually identify it? Or do you think it's something where we have the tools and we're looking, but it's probably not in this solar system, it's in a different solar system?
Yeah, I think it's beyond our technology at this point.
Yeah.
I think we are still struggling with space travel. I mean, I think this, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought this was ridiculous. The spaceship that's going from India to the moon, it's taking 20 days for them to get there. And I think that's right. But in 1969, when the U.S. landed on the moon with people, it took 4 days.
Allegedly.
4 days. I don't understand why we were able to do it so much more rapidly and why we were able to land on the moon with humans with very limited technology as compared to India launching today and not putting a person on the moon. They're literally going into a low orbit and landing, I think, a rover on the moon. You know, I don't think that our instrumentation is subtle enough to pick up life. Maybe that, like, life in the way you're asking me the question. But I think we found water, and I think bacteria are everywhere.
Area 51, you think there's anything there?
Yeah, definitely, but I would not storm it. I think that is just a mistake. Like, please don't do that. I mean, the guy who's dressed like a wizard, he's amazing, but he's going to get a clam gif. Yeah, don't do that. But yeah, Area 51.
What do you think's there?
I think there's advanced propulsion. I mean, when you think about, you served in which war?
Iraq.
What year?
2008, 2009.
Right. So the first Gulf War, that's when we put stealth technology out. That technology was from 1970. We showed it in Gulf 1. That's when we first showed the technology.
Is that 20-something years later, right?
Stealth technology, right? Stealth bomber, stealth fighter, what have you. There is absolutely no way we don't have aircraft that can go up, down, left, and right using different types of propulsion systems, magnetics, etc. So, that's what's out in those testing grounds. Those are advanced warfare technology. I don't know if there are aliens there. So.
Well, or the thing that
I think there are spacecraft that are there that may have crashed that nobody needs to see.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's also...
But there were human pilots on that.
Yeah, and to me, the thing that is so interesting is everyone is focused on the warfare. Everyone is focused on the aliens and kind of all of these, like, frankly, things that are really cool to think about, right? But what about, like, I don't know, CRISPR technology and genetic editing and things that it's not, hey, I can fly something over your country, right? I'm talking about changing the human population at birth in a way that could be very drastic and create an inflection point either for positive or negative. Where's that research happening? Right?
Yeah, it is happening. Nanotechnology, embeddables, these like shrink you down to some type of device and embed that. It's all here. It's all here. I think it was Melton that was watching The Matrix recently and saying like how forward thinking and powerful that movie is, because it really is. I would challenge you to watch The Matrix again in the series. That stuff is more real than it's not.
They nailed it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we're coming up on 2.5 hours. What one question do you have for me?
I want to ask the real one. So no, I'm going to ask. So first, I have two questions. What did
we might have to cut off the podcast. I know one of the questions he's trying to ask.
One, what did you get Polina for her birthday?
I haven't given it to her yet, so I'll wait till I give it to her.
All right. I'm gonna let you off the hook.
We're recording this, and I haven't gotten Polina her gift yet, so I actually have no answer.
No, it's just priorities, man. Polina is super important. I want her to be happy. That's an important person.
She appreciates you.
Yeah, I want to be invited to the wedding.
She's also gonna now tell me, oh, it's so nice of Jason to talk about me on the podcast. So perfect.
No, she's sharp. She's sharp.
All right,
you're a lucky guy.
I appreciate it. I'll make sure that she knows that she'll probably listen to this twice now and cut up the audio and then play it back for me to remind me at times.
Yeah, she's something else, man.
All right, great podcast. Jason wants to ask when I'm getting married. That's his big question.
Yeah, that's right. I just want to go to the wedding. I think it'd be fun.
So I've actually never talked about this on here, but I'll say,
let's go.
I don't believe in big weddings. I don't think that's like a thing.
It doesn't have to be big, man. I just want to be there.
I kind of think that when I get married, I might just get married with nobody there. Why not?
I did.
Okay. So I just want to be like you. Perfect.
I mean, I did. My wife and I got married in Kauai. It was just her and I.
Yeah. Would you do it again?
Yeah.
Right? Without anybody
No
there?
hassle.
That's what I'm saying. No hassle, no pressure. There's no anything. It's just you're there with the person that it's between you and them.
That was nice. We had a real ceremony and everything, but it was just two of us.
Why not?
I just want to be there, man.
We'll FaceTime you in. We're gonna do it from Mars.
Oh my gosh!
All right, listen. Good. I appreciate you coming and doing this. I think people will enjoy it. So thanks so much for everyone to listen to this. I know it's a long one, but hopefully you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Hey everyone, Pomp here. If you like this episode of Off the Chain and want to help us take crypto to the top of the Apple, Spotify, and other podcast charts, please do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe. To review, simply go to the Off the Chain homepage, scroll down until you see the 5 blank stars. Taking 15 seconds to fill those stars in and leave a quick review goes a long way in helping us take the entire crypto ecosystem to the top of the charts. I appreciate you listening and see you next time on Off the Chain.